Willing Flesh by Adam Creed. Read by Jonathan Oliver. 1. Elena Dania steps from her roll-top bath, her back straight and toes pointed down, as if she's doing dressage. She drips water all across the polished limestone floor. Foam sticks to her body and makes her modest. She rubs a porthole in the misted mirror and regards herself in the low, flickering candle glow. The bath, over her shoulder, looks the part, and she recalls her expectations of England. When she left home 2 long years ago, her mother had pinched her cheek, assured her she would make something of herself for the family, find a prince. Elena smiles. It is coming to fruition. What she sees now in the mirror is the way she likes herself. Pink-skinned and with pale eyes, her hair straight in dripping tails, the palest outline of the flesh of her lips. Every last trace of her makeup is washed away. It is how God made her. And she can be this self again for 2 whole days. She will read her novel all morning, doing a few jobs around the place between chapters, then catch the afternoon train up to the coast. It will be dark when she checks into the Signet Hotel, and she will sit on the window seat of the bay window in her room and draw up her knees and watch the lights glimmer out at sea, then eat alone in the splendidly faded panelled dining room, fond smiles from her fellow residents. They may think it strange that such a wholesome girl is eating alone. They may speculate at what she is running from, or towards. Some staff may recognise her, recalling her in the company of a man, or 2. Tomorrow she will walk on the sands in a late dawn, way past the pier with its shiplap huts. Then Elena will take a full breakfast and return to her seat to finish her book. Then she will take another, longer walk to the harbour at Warblingsea, before the latest lunch she can muster, because she knows that when she returns to her room and the sun sets, wintry early, she will ease herself between the sheets, and she will look east across the North Sea, and she will cry. Next day, on the very first train back to Liverpool Street, normal service will resume. But not for long. She is changing. She thanks the stars that she gets such days to herself. She is lucky. Other girls work 7 days, or 7 nights, and sometimes both. Elena pads through to her bedroom and drags the sheets from the bed. Still naked, she carries the load to her kitchen and crams the linen into the washing machine and double doses the fabric softener, sets the machine to a boil cycle. The telephone rings, fracturing such normal domestic service. She answers, sitting cross-legged on the chilled tile floor, but the sound of Rebecca's voice is warm. She sounds like a child, can look like a child if she wishes, if somebody else wishes. Rebecca is not so lucky as Elena. She has a different appeal. "You're still going up there?" says Rebecca. "You sound upset." "I don't want anything to happen to you." "It is only the seaside," says Elena. "We don't have to do anything, you know. I've got my franc." "It's arranged, Rebecca." She says it like Marlene Dietrich might. Rebecca. "We trust ourselves, yes?" "Mitch is coming," whispers Rebecca, suddenly afraid. "Is he?" But the phone cracks, dies, quick as a broken bone. Elena takes a carton of apple juice back through to the bedroom. Apple juice is good for the stomach. She has problems with her stomach. She plumps up the bare pillows and leans back with Mansfield Park, draws up her knees. A part of her hates this room. The sounds and shapes she has made right here never quite fade to nothing. By the end of the first paragraph on the downturned page, Elena has caught up with where she left off, and she feels her mouth turn up at the edges into a smile. Then the phone rings. She considers ignoring it, but it might be her mother. She pictures her mother, wrapped in many coats and a thick woolen scarf around her head, in the phone box at the bottom of the block of flats, bitter winds whipping up off the snowy river. "Hello," says Elena. "My love," says the man. It is Makari. His voice is light but guarded, suggesting someone is with him. This makes our heart heavy. "You called to wish me a happy trip." "I don't think so." "You promised me 2 days." "This will be good for us, good for everybody." He laughs. But he is sad, really. She knows the real him. There is definitely somebody with him. "It could be good for another girl." "There's only you, Lena, you know that. You are different." "I won't do it," she says, holding herself tight around the knees. Something in her stomach twists, and she feels her voice crack. "Make yourself white, my love. Be gentle. He's shy. You are perfect." He lowers his voice and sounds absolutely sincere when he says, soft as powder, "I love you." Elena knows better than to tell Makari he couldn't possibly love her. Instead says, "You should love me more." "It's the Thames Bank. Room 601. "I don't like hotels, Marquis." "In an hour," he says, hanging up. She picks up Mansfield Park and throws it at the wall. It could tell hundreds of variations of a single tale. Staffe knows his limit, and he watches unmoving as the bids for the Crimean shaving stand climb higher and higher. He won't pay more than a month's take-home for any lot, ever. He could, but it would be wrong. 2,800, says the auctioneer. He looks towards Staffe, even though he hasn't bid, because he knows him of old, and they talked about the stand on the phone only yesterday. Staffe makes the faintest shake of the head, puts the catalogue behind his back, and moves back through the crowd, checks his watch. He has seen an intaglio ring from the Urals. It is of Russian gold and has an emerald the colour of Sylvie's eyes. It is most definitely not what he came for, but as the gavel comes down on the shaving stand, he trusts the instinct that he must have it. His watch says 11:45, and he should be with Sylvie at the Eagle and Child by noon. She'll understand, he assures himself, especially when she sees what kept him. An eager brace of couples push past him from the back of the room, and the bidding for the Urals ring starts at £1,200. It's worth £3,000 any day of the week, but as the battle reduces to the eager couples, at £2,000, and rising in measly 50s, Staffe raises his hand, says, loud and forceful, 2.5. A most English gasp whispers around the medieval hall, and the auctioneer can't help but smile. He pauses for effect. Does anybody care for this more than Mr. Wagstaff? It is Staffe's one and only bid. He knows it would have crept up towards and beyond his limit, but his bid asserts that he may well go far higher. That is a lie. He closes his eyes and wishes the round thud of the gavel. He holds his breath, pictures Sylvie's face as he proffers the box. The silence in the room deepens, and Staffe can hear the hurried confidences of the two bidding couples. He opens his eyes, and they each turn, look at him. The gavel thuds, and Staffe goes straight to the cashier, unable to look the outbid lovers in the eye. He drives on the limit all the way from Chipping Norton back to Oxford, and shows his City of London warrant card to the man parading the pay and display at Martyrs' Memorial. Gets a nod of reverence in return. They are here because Sylvie says it's a part of him she doesn't understand. She thinks it madder than a trunk full of frogs that he shies away from his alma mater. And he brought her this side of town, staying at the Randolph rather than his college, Merton, the other end of Cornmarket and beyond. Sylvie has gone from the pub, according to the American 12-year-old managing the place, and Staffe ambles down past the memorial, where the Protestants Cranmer, Ridley and Latimer yielded their bodies to be burned at the behest of Mary Tudor and the Church of Rome. Opposite the Randolph, he sees her, in the window of the dining room, laughing with a floppy-haired, chisel-jawed man her own age, looking £1,000,000 in a battered tweed jacket. It must be Ollie. They were at Goldsmiths together. Staffe waits on the corner, by the Ashmolean, hoping she will see him and come out. Even though he is hopelessly late, she isn't looking up, is too engrossed. He calls the station. Is he already missing the city's fast beat? "You're away for the weekend, sir," says his DS. Pulford. "Rimmer's looking after things, sir." "Rimmer, yes, sir?" says Pulford, with feigned curiosity. "You just call me, right, if anything serious happens." Rimmer isn't Staffe's idea of a detective inspector. Poor bugger. Rimmer probably isn't even Rimmer's idea of a DI, but it's in his blood. "But I'm out on a new surveillance, sir." "Surveillance? Which one?" "A couple of new Labour gangs, maybe illegal. And you said I wasn't to disturb you, under any circumstances. You said—" Staffe turns off his phone, looks back up at the Randolph. He puts his hand in his pocket and takes out the intaglio ring, holds it up to the light. Tonight he's taking Sylvie out to Great Milton, to Le Manoir for dinner, and he will play things by ear, but, if all goes to plan, he will give her the ring. Sylvie waves at him from the hotel entrance, laughing. Her hair billows in the wind, and she holds it to one side as she kisses the handsome young man on the cheek, then the other. He holds her by the hips as they do it. When he walks away, he studiously avoids looking towards Staffe, as if it was determined it would be better if he wasn't introduced. Maybe he will let her make of the gift what she will. She holds her arms open as Staffe comes toward her. "What handsome friends you have," says Staffe. "Who? Ollie? Did you get the piece?" He shakes his head. "Too rich for me. I'm not made of money." She gives him a look. Tuts. "Liar." Two. Elena Dania looks up at the Thamesbank Hotel. It could have been commissioned by Stalin, with its square bulk of grey render and its uniform steel windows. They spent £60 million refurbishing it a couple of years back and crowned it with 2 burnished domes. Now, to stay one night, without the pleasure of Elena, commands a month of her mother's labour back home. For an extra 500, you could fuck lovely Elena, anywhere but the arse. Today, like Macari said, she is white, and she will be supremely gentle for her shy, mystery client. Her blonde hair is freshly washed and plumped, and she pulls up her oyster fur collar against the riverside chill. She truly looks like somebody's lovely sister come 60s model. A young Saudi swaggers out of the revolving doors and stops dead mid-step. He looks back at her, mouth open, as she goes into the lobby. At the desk, she places her almost empty attaché case on the impeccable mahogany glaze of the counter and says, "Papers for 601. Madam," says the concierge, looking down at the register, where the booking has been made in pencil, paid in cash. "These are chartered waters." Elena makes her way across the lobby, the size of a tennis court. Her stilettos clip across the marble, and she holds her head high, eyes upon her. A young man in a pillbox hat and high-waisted trousers leans against his luggage buggy. He looks her up and down quite deliberately, with piercing, light eyes, almost white. Their eyes meet, and she thinks they know each other. His badge says, Gary. The top of her leg vibrates, and Elena thrusts her hand into the special inside pocket she commissioned to the lining of her fur. She lifts the phone to her ear before it rings. "Where are you?" says the voice from the phone. "Ara? Ara, is that you? Are you okay? Don't sweat, Lena, honey. Are you there?" Elena looks at Gary. He hasn't taken his eyes off her. She moves towards the floor-to-ceiling windows that give onto the river. She can see the south bank way across to her right, upriver. Above, the sky is heavy with snow, she thinks. In a hushed voice, she says, "I'm at the Thames Bank." "You don't like hotels? Who are you meeting?" "I don't know." "Is it one of his friends? You should watch yourself." "Why did you call, Ara?" The line falls silent. "Ara? Are you out of it?" "I've got a bad feeling is all. I'm worried about Bex." "Rebecca, it will be Christmas soon. Everything will be different," says Elena. But the phone is dead. She slips it back into the special pocket of her fur, its perfect form unspoiled. She makes her way back across the lobby, and Gary has beads of sweat on his temples, as if he oozes desire. The lift doors close, and something inside her dilates. She feels ready, quickly opens the attaché case, and goes into her silver pillbox for a pre-taste of the finale powder. One for the left nostril, and one for the right. A quick dust down. Doors open. She steps out, one foot in front of the other, all the time changing herself into something that she surely is not. The door to room 601 is ajar, and Elena presses it open, ready to smile. But the room is empty. Water gushes from beyond a closed door. She steps inside and places her attaché case on the desk by the window. Across the river she can see the Oxo Tower. Macari took her there once. He spent a fortune on the meal, and they had a wonderful evening. He made her laugh, and she had lobster, and then a crêpe Suzette. She felt like a film star, and that night she kissed him by Westminster Bridge, and he took her to that place in Cloth Fair, and they made love. She thinks how much easier it would be if she could love him properly, if he was enough. She senses someone behind her, and she dilates again, unbuttoning her fur, letting it slide to the floor, leaning forward, placing her hands on the window ledge. She hears him. Close now. Elena tenses her buttocks and waits for the viper's zip behind her. Waits for his hands to be on her, kneading and tugging at the angel-white silk of her whore's finery. Macari said he was shy, so she doesn't turn him on. Plots ahead that she will make him quick but stop him dead in his tracks. And then she will do what she is famous for. taking both balls in her mouth as they 6 and 9, and he snorts a line all the way down from her navel and up again. Then she will finish him and take the money. Right now she thinks she must be mad for wanting to go up to Suffolk to read a book. Sometimes she just doesn't understand herself. But there is so much more at stake than what she allows her willing flesh to imply. However, this one is taking his time. She tenses her buttocks again, one, then the other. And in the window, in amongst the view of the Thames, she sees the moving watermark of her client coming towards her, lithe or scrawny. She wonders if she should turn on him slowly, but she waits to feel his hands on her. She wonders if she might enjoy him, a 1 in 20. Then he takes her breath away. She feels a dull pain in her kidneys, and her head whiplashes away from her, the south bank warping, twisting out of sight as she catches her head on the corner of the radiator. She falls into the soft fur of her coat, thinks she may pass out, thinks, this will hurt in the morning. She wants to stand and fight him, but as he tugs at her, she feels all her strength seep onto the lush white carpet. A seam of red. And with a last glance up, she sees a pale shadow over her, and as the room goes dark, she sees a vision of her mother. She cannot move, and the darkness deepens. She can't breathe. Her face is hard up against the soft carpet, and something inside her seems to die. Staffe lies back on the vast, plumped bed and stares out of the low window down at gloaming St. Giles. It has rained lightly, threatening to snow, and the cobbles warp in the college light's curved reflections. The shower stops running, and Sylvie emerges, dripping, holding a Mai Tai. He doesn't know where it came from. She bends down, kisses him, and he pulls her on top of him. She rolls away, holding her Mai Tai high. She takes a long swallow, drinking it greedily, not like a lady, but because she loves the taste, and looks up at the ceiling, kind of sad. He follows suit. "It would be nice to do nothing," she says. "If you like." "But you've booked a table." "I can cancel." "You said it was your favourite place." "Second favourite." He places a hand on the pod of fat at the top of her thigh. Sylvie leans up on her elbow, facing Staffe, and hooks her leg over his. "Sometimes, Will." She kisses him on the temple, her wet hair dripping on him. "You say exactly the right thing." She takes another sip. "Sometimes." "We can go to the restaurant." "I can compromise, you know." "When it suits," she says, stroking his chest. "Let's stay here." He wants to know if she and Ollie ever went out, and where and when did he watch her emerge from the shower. Was he ever bad to her? Did she acquire her taste for Mai Tai from him? Why did they stop seeing each other? He sighs. "What's wrong?" she says. He would give her beautiful children. "You never say you want children." "Will, what's brought this on?" He looks across the room to his jacket on the back of the chair by the window. The Ural ring is in the inside pocket, and he wonders if this might be the right time. "Is this because you saw me with Ollie?" "You were with him." Sylvie stands up, strides across the room, puts her drink down heavy. "People can see," he says. "It's dark outside and the light's on." "Bugger them," she says, reaching into her bag and pulling out a fresh pair of pants. She steps into them and turns to Staffe, hands on hips. Maybe we should go out for dinner. Staffe remembers from somewhere that Mai Tai reminds Sylvie of the sun, and she drinks them when she is happy, not to get happy. Why are you happy? Says Staffe. Who says I am? His mobile phone rings. Sylvie looks at it and back to Staffe. You'd better get that. He shakes his head. I don't want to. Come here. She smiles and pads across the floor, wonky and creaking. She bounces on the bed and straddles him, her hands splayed on his chest. Babies, eh, Staffe? What's come over you? Well, most people at least discuss it. You're not most people. We're not most people. I like things the way they are. She leans down and kisses him. A shrill telephone rings from the bedside table. Nobody knows where we are, she says. That's what you said. Three. Arabella shivers awake. The orange teardrop shape of the streetlight through the threadbare fabric at the window signals the day is over. Her head aches with a low, flatlining boom as she pushes herself off the mattress and draws the sheet around her. She checks her phone to see if Rebecca has called, more from hope than expectation. And, right enough, the last call registering is the one she made to Elena. Shit, she says. What'd you say? Calls a man from the next room. Arabella clambers off the bed and goes to the window, drawing back the fabric which is nailed up to the old pelmet. She sees her own broken and pale reflection in the cracked pane and is disappointed. But she swallows deeply and tries to convince herself that this is the better life. You call me, says Darius from the doorway. I'm cold. Hold me. I'm worried, Ara. He is stick-thin and wearing low jeans and a tracksuit top that don't match the plums to his voice. He has a mop of Bible-black curling hair and fine delicate bones, cherub lips. What's to worry about? I'm worried about you. Those friends of yours. What about you and one of those friends of mine? Don't be stupid. He takes her into the crook of his neck and holds her tight, rubbing her back, running his hands up and down along her washboard ribs. You're fading away. Arabella pushes him away and turns back to the window. All along the street, the windows are boarded up, and the builders have packed away for the day. Old toilets and doors packed high in the skip. The other night, they had hammers and chains and got the squatters from next door. We can't stay here, Ara. I know that, she says, making herself strong. She coughs, dry as dust. You should call your father. Don't talk to me about my father. You're as bad as each other. She loses her balance, sits clumsily in the chair. I sometimes think you're on his side. You're sick, Ara. You should lay off the gear for a while. He sits on the floor, cross-legged, and jabs his fingers into his thick hair. There's a party up St. John's Wood. He looks up, forcing a smile. She clouds over, fixes herself a line and a jug of sweet tea, says, I need 40 or so. Darius hands her 3 20s. You take care of me, Darry. I love that. Like I said, there's a party. There's more where that came from. The SOC lights are brilliant and flood the beautiful woman's naked body. She seems blue as ocean in this light, her edges harsh as rocks. Her curves are long and bold, A pendant of dried blood sullies the cream carpet to the right of her head. Staffe wants to be alone with her, but the room is full of forensics, and Josie, and Rimmer. He can't take his eyes from the beautiful woman. She has a thin smile, and somehow an inquisitiveness in her dead expression. A serene willingness, it seems. Staffe asks Janine, "Is this a sexual assault?" Janine, the city police pathologist, crouches down beside the body and points at the confluence of Elena's buttocks and thighs with the tip of her tweezers. "I wouldn't like to say for sure until I've done the autopsy, but I don't think they penetrated." "They left her naked," says Rimmer, punching away at his BlackBerry. He's wearing a chalk-striped suit and his shoes are brilliantly shined. You would never guess from the look of him that he hasn't got the stomach for this. "What was the sequence of events? Can you hazard a guess?" "I don't think it was the blow to the head. There's skin on the corner of the radiator, but no bruising. I need to check her mouth and throat, but she may well have been smothered." "That bastard on the desk won't tell us anything," says Rimmer. "He says the room hadn't even been registered. Says a Finnish banker had reserved the room for tonight, but he hadn't shown up." "Don't go upsetting the apple cart," says Staffe. "The apple cart? We don't want them closing ranks. I want statements of all staff in the building between midday and 7. He turns to Josie Chancellor, his young DC who was working with Rimmer while Staffe was up in Oxford. "Set up booths in the main conference room. I need 8 uniforms here, and—" He looks at Rimmer. "We'll have absolute silence. Nobody talks." Staffe turns to Janine. "I need a time of death." He looks across at Josie. "Do we have an ID on her?" "There was only her case, sir. All that was in it was a couple of grams of coke in a pillbox." "Good stuff?" "I'd say so," says Janine. "And the case? I need to know every shot from Stansted to Gatwick that stocks the make." "We're on to that, sir," says Josie. He runs his fingers through his hair and sighs. "What about her clothes?" "They left her completely naked. Must have taken the clothes." "Who found her?" "A maid," says Josie. "She's Portuguese. Heard a phone ringing and ringing. She waited 1/4 of an hour." "Where's the phone?" Josie holds up a tiny gold Nokia in a plastic bag. "It was in an inside pocket of the coat." Josie nods down at the fur, still under the naked woman. "Have you checked to see what number was ringing?" Yes, sir. Someone called Markari." "Markari?" says Staffe. "You know him?" "A few years ago, if it's the same one. We'll need to see every byte of data in that phone." He walks out of the room, pausing at the door. "Call me when this room is empty. I'll be downstairs." Sylvie is talking to one of the waiters in the Thamesbank dining room. It is the end of service, and Staffe pauses at the entrance to the grand room, a modern classic of high-glazed paint and suede upholstery. The waiter is leaning forward, hands clasped behind him, back perfectly straight, but he is making Sylvie laugh. As Staffe approaches, the waiter sidles away. Sylvie straightens her face and pats the seat next to her, says, "They're doing us some lemon sole and a cheese board." Staffe shakes his napkin loose, places it in his lap, and resets his cutlery. "You don't have to be here." "I understand, Will." She squeezes his knee. "Somebody died, and this is what you do." He wants to say, "That's not what you've always said," but he knows better. He leans forward, confides, "I think she was a prostitute." "Did she suffer?" "I mean, badly." He shakes his head, pours them each some sparkling water. "I don't think so, not especially." He sips from his glass, says, "I could get us a room. You've got all your things in the car. I could be done in an hour or so." "Well, you could come to mine." It is a bone of contention that Sylvie always comes to Staffe's place. There was a time, and still sometimes is, when Staffe thinks this is something sinister. He has a key now, which he has never used. "Will, I said you could come to mine." "Fine." "Look, I know you need your space, and so do I." "I didn't say anything about space." Sylvie leans back and clasps her hands together behind her head. She blows her cheeks out, looks him in the eye and laughs. "You're hard work, Will Wagstaff. Fuck me if you're not." "I'm not," he says. "Maybe we should stay here." She leans down, pats her handbag. "I've got a good book." "And I'll bring some cocoa." Staffe turns off the SOC lights in room 601, and the dead woman seems to move. He thinks she has pulled up her knees ever so slightly, tucked her chin, nestling down, but it is a trick of the gloom. Janine will return for the beautiful corpse soon, to butterfly her like a delicate spatchcock, and glean from the blood and tissue of her, and the liquids and substances in and on her, quite how she spent the last moments of her life. She will also determine when the woman died, that he can eliminate the innocent. Staffe leans against the wall and slides down onto his haunches. He has her in his eye line, her cold flesh between him and the river, which is like a silver ribbon in the moonlight. This is a room designed for love or seduction, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and its opulent furnishings. It is not a place for any Tom, Dick or Harry to come a-killing. Outside, a boat moves slowly downriver, its stern light dull in the estuary fret. He envies the skipper, making his way to sea, a whistling kettle down below and the sizzle of bacon at dawn's first. The horizon getting no closer, all day long. He closes the door behind him and locks it, hands the key to the uniformed constable in the corridor. "A long day, sir?" "Longer before we're through." A new design is emerging for the night. All he has is the call from Makari, and he takes the lift down, turns his thoughts to the man who was first to call this beautiful woman after she died. Taki Makari crossed Staffe's path some years ago when Chinamen were mass-burning DVDs in a building that was leased to a company, which was owned by a company, which was managed by a trust, whose ultimate beneficiary was a charity run by Taki Makari's wife, Sema. Makari emerged unscathed from that investigation, but during its course, Staffe became aware that the smooth Turk had made his money selling arms to Iraq in the 1990 war. That hadn't quite tallied with what Staffe had seen. Makari hadn't seemed cut out for such rough trading, seemed intent on a far finer life. The traffic on Embankment is thin, tail lights like far-strung rubies. From the dash, his phone glows, emerald. It is Pulford, which makes Staffe glad, to know the young sergeant is working through the poker hours. "What have you got?" "Makari's clean as a whistle, still living in Mayfair. His wife's got a couple of nightclubs in Istanbul. She's old money." "Kids?" "No." "How old is she?" "Younger, 40. He's 50, but he looks like a handsome fella, like the one who plays cards, you know. It's bridge, Pulford, a bit more than the card game." Staffe cuts up through Whitehall, making his way towards the frosted halls of government. You mean Omar Sharif? That's all I've got, apart from a list of companies. He's got the executive off Berkeley Square. Well, that's practically a brothel. But he looks legit, sir. Sorry. Don't be sorry, Pulford. It's supposed to be a good thing when people comply with the law. Staffe hangs up, watches St. James Clubland discharge a final few. The cars in this part of God's London, all Italian and German, are beginning to frost, sparkling in the soft orange streetlight like candied fruits. Staffe parks his battered Peugeot on Mount Street and looks up at the stucco building. His breath trails in the wintry air, and he presses 3, waits for the response. Eventually a weary voice comes crystal clear in the silver speaker grill. Macari sounds more refined than Staffe recalls. The voice is soft, the easternness light on the edges of his vowels. "What do you want this time of night? Who is that?" Staffe looks up at the video camera and smiles. "Just a word." He holds his warrant card up to the lens. "Inspector Wagstaff, Leadengate CID." "What?" "You phoned a girl. Something happened to her." "Which girl?" "Let me in." "You best be quick. 2nd floor." The latch whirs. Staffe pushes the door and a light comes on automatically. Staffe sinks into the lush pile underfoot. There is a smell of the Orient, and the common parts are adorned with gilded oil paintings, pre-Raphaelite copies. The lift is silent. He can't imagine that anyone living here would ever be brought down. When he gets to Macari's floor, the door to the apartment is open and his host is on the telephone. "They're here now." "Yes, I'm not an idiot." "Your solicitor, Mr. Macari? Odd behaviour for someone who's done nothing wrong." Staffe fixes him firm in the eyes. The years have been kind. His grey-flecked black hair is cut dapper, and even at this hour it is slicked back in tight waves from a matinee hairline that juts to the temples. He is no more than half a stone overweight in his polo shirt and linen trousers. "You called her at 2:47. "Called? Who?" Staffe scrutinises a painting of a woman, seemingly seated in a crowd of people but looking lost. She has fine features, but her face is dirty, the clothes grubby. "Is it true what they say about how you pay for all this?" "Who are they?" "It's what we call received wisdom." "Oui. Do you not consider me to be one of you, Inspector Wagstaff? They call me Staffe." "They say racism is rife in the Metropolitan Police Force." "I'm not with the Met. I am City." He locks Macari down with a withering stare. "And I'm no racist. But that doesn't mean I have to give house room to foreign criminals. We have met before." "I don't recall." Macari goes to a walnut secretaire and pulls down the front, pours himself a large measure of spirit from a cut-glass decanter. "Life continues to be kind, I take it, since your Chinaman let you down?" Macari moves towards Staffe. "You have an interesting karma. You are unfulfilled." "You are wrong." "Your mask slips, Inspector, but you can never see that." He clasps his hand together behind his back and regards the painting. "Perhaps Sickert could have shown me." You know your art. Makari squints. You can read her just from this moment in time. He is a genius to see into her this way, to commit her so. Staffe thinks of the beautiful, fair corpse, her face and the shape of her locked in time. They killed her, Taki. I'm going to find out who and why. I'd have thought you'd want the same for your girl. How do you mean, my girl? Why do you call prostitutes, Taki? Is your wife here? What did she look like? He whispers. I can only tell you how she looked in that last moment. Staffe takes the glass from him, sips. It is Armagnac of the highest quality. He holds on to it, and as he takes a step back, he says, She looked as if she was about to enjoy what she did. She was pale as snow. Her hair had long curls, and she was lying on an oyster fur. Makari blinks quickly 3-4 times, and reaches for the glass, snatches it away. I have nothing to tell you. He downs the Armagnac in one and sits on the sofa, flicking through the estate's gazette, not reading it at all. Shame to drag your lawyer out of bed for nothing. Nothing? I've got what I want. Staffe looks down on Makari and raises his voice half a notch. I shan't fuck about. I'll talk to your wife if I need to, just in case she used your phone by mistake, and it was actually her speaking to this poor murdered girl you don't give two bloody hoots for. He feels his blood quicken, and he breathes in long. Makari looks up, says in a tender, cracking voice, What did they do to her? Staffe looks at the painting again. They say Sickert knew the Ripper, the original. Makari nods. Some say he was the Ripper. As Staffe goes into the hall, Makari's wife emerges from a bedroom. She is older than the whore, and she is beautiful. Staffe lets himself out, murmurs, I'll rip your bloody mask off. Four. Janine stands back from the pale victim, rigor mortis yet to manifest itself. The woman had been decomposing for approximately 7 hours, until she was moved to this controlled environment. The skin will not blister or slip for now, and she remains purest white. Janine puts the back of her hand to the woman's hip. The skin is cold as slate, but the flesh yields, untethered. Janine has cut her open from collarbones to breastplate, and down to the pubis. Her insides are bare to this windowless, photo-flood corner of the world. She flicks off the operating lights, and an electric hum disappears into the early morning in a strange reversal of nature. But you don't get birdsong this time of year. Janine sits in the corner, hands on her knees and back straight, drinking in the scene. Some colleagues are immune to the objects of their craft, the lives in the wake. Janine takes counsel each month for the loss of her subjects. But this beautiful woman and her frozen look has haunted her since she first shone a torch into her mouth and nose and elsewhere. A knock at the opening door makes her flinch, and she begins to stand, but when she sees it is Staffe, she slumps back down in her seat. He forces a smile, but she can tell he is practically out on his feet. For the first few seconds, each time they meet, she can't help remembering when they were together. It was a brief affair, if you could flatter it so, and it ended quickly, amicably. She considers him a friend. Fears for him sometimes. "You want some coffee?" she asks. "I'll make the coffee. Talk me through it." He takes a jar of instant coffee and powdered milk from the cupboard beneath the high barred window, which is curb level. There was no sperm inside her, just a trace secretion of her own fluids in the gusset of her pants. The pants are Rigby and Peller. Staffe turns round, raises his eyebrows, and they each decide not to share a private joke. There's no bruising or laceration. The vagina had not been penetrated. The head and the blood on the carpet are juxtaposed. She didn't move an inch once she hit the ground. "Not your typical sexual act," he says. There are only 6 strands of fur fibre and no carpet fibres in her nose, and none in the mouth or throat, and no trace of inhalation of the fibres from the pillowcase. "She was unconscious when they finished her off, with the pillow," says Staffe. "No struggle." "Look at her face. The expression." "I have." The kettle boils. "No damage to the nose or cheeks, no bruising to the lips. The skin and blood on the radiator are a perfect match. She has a bruise to her lower neck, which may have been caused by a knee during a suffocation, but there's a defined epicentre to the bruise. I think it was a rapid blow." "And the fall against the radiator? An accident?" "I don't think accident covers anything that happened to this girl." "The pillow could be part of a sexual design." Janine shakes her head, goes across to fix her coffee the way she likes it. Staffe has left it black for her to finish. He remembers. She glimpses the woman's fur hanging in the corner. It is a vintage, natural oyster mink with a wing collar, the real thing. "Was that your girlfriend at the Thames Bank?" "We'd been away for the weekend." Janine wonders why people put themselves through that. Why not fast forward to the heartache and tears and save yourself the pain? "Getting serious, hey, Staffe?" He smiles, thin-lipped. "What happened in that hotel room?" "Over to you, lover boy." Janine takes off her gloves and washes down. When she is done, she catches Staffe standing over the body, staring deep into the woman's face. "It gets worse," she says. "How?" he says, not looking away. "Some might say there's another victim." "What?" He looks up. Janine suddenly feels cold as he follows her look to a small table on the far side of the room. There, barely larger than a grape, is a dead fetus. She was pregnant, well. Darius is out, scoring coke and MDMA for the party. He'll be out all night, so Arabella has walked across to Beck's place, on a litre bottle of super-strong cider and her last line. Beck's had some crack when she last saw her, and with a bit of luck they might be able to suck on the pipe before they go out. Her feet are rubbed raw in her sharp-toed take-me boots, and she's so cold that she can't feel the metal against her finger when she presses the buzzer. Her nose is running and she stands back, hoping to see the curtains shift. They do, but it isn't Beck's. The lock whirs anyway, and she pushes the door open, makes her way up the stairs. Mitch is leaning against the frame of the door. He's wearing a pork pie hat and has tats on his neck and arms, piercings in his nose and eyebrows. He looks her up and down. He's gorgeous and knows it, and exactly the type Beck's always gets snarled up with. But Arabella has his measure. "You want to fuck off," says Arabella, placing an open palm on his T-shirt chest. "I've got Darius." He looks her all the way down to her heels and sneers. "Looks like it." He goes into the flat and Arabella follows him in. The place is done up nice with soft lighting and ethnic knickknacks. It is warm, and a red glow comes off the electric fire pulled up to the sofa. Both bars are on. Ara wouldn't need much to get her and Darius a place like this. It is time to have that chat with her father. Time, too, to work on her music. For Darius to go back to his art. "Where's the guitar?" says Arabella, looking around the living room. "In our bedroom." Mitch smiles at her, pulling on a leather biker's jacket. "I'm popping out." "When's Bex coming back?" He pauses by the door. "No point having a rummage." He taps his pocket. "It's all here. Stay out the bedroom, girl, I'm warning you." His smile goes off like power, cut. He suddenly looks capable of the terrible. "Slag," he says, closing the door. Arabella heaves off her boots and flops onto the sofa. The sheet of heat off the electric fire hits her shins straight away, works its way down to her toes and up along her long, thin thighs. She closes her eyes, the mind slowing right down, memories drifting to that sad house across town. She misses her mother, who was Imogen and beautiful, making the men smile but sometimes crying when she drank wine, which her father didn't like. They would argue, and her brother Roddy would run to his room. But Arabella would clutch onto Imogen's skirts, sobbing, looking up at her father and wondering how she could love such a man. After, he would hold Arabella tight, and they would cry together, and she loved him again. From the bedroom, music pipes through. It is house, but with a Latin flavour, and the swooning trumpet loop ushers her to a deeper rest. She dreams that she cannot hear the sound of her own name in her mother's mouth. The warmth of the fire seeps deeper into her flesh. She dreams, too, that she is standing at the gate looking up, a small case in hand. Her father calls her a whore. "Nothing but a whore like your mother." When she falters from sleep, Arabella has been crying, and the music from the bedroom seems to get louder, but Arabella keeps her eyes closed. She thinks, if I open my eyes, all the changes will begin to happen. She hopes that Bex will come. The music goes up another notch, and this puzzles Arabella. Moments later, she feels a shadow scroll across her. A tall figure looks down at her. He is tall and fair with the straight nose, just like her, like Imogen, too. She scrunches her eyes tight shut and rolls away onto the floor. She waits for him to come at her, but he doesn't. He just stands there. "What the hell are you playing at, Bella?" "Roddy?" She sits up, peers up at him. "What the fuck are you doing here?" She scoots back on her bottom away from him, her back against the sofa. Even though he is her brother, whom she bullied when she was young, now she is afraid. He is one of them, and a different kettle of fish when their father's not around. "I can come see my big sis if I want." "Well, I don't want, so fuck off." "He wants to see you, Bella." "Father, is it me or my friend he wants?" "You have to settle this nonsense." "I'm not afraid of you." "But you can be." Roddy seems altered tonight, wearing twisted jeans and a white tee under a combat jacket. He's put wax in his hair. "How did you get in here?" He needs to know you won't do anything stupid. She looks her brother up and down and wishes she could feel different. Says, "Don't tell him you know I'm here." "Where's Darry?" says Roddy, trying hard to sound casual. "He's providing for me." "He's using you, is what you mean." "I use him." "You really don't know anything." Roddy turns his back, doesn't give her so much as a glance, says, "You do the right thing, Bella." "Have a heart, Roddy. Have a fucking heart." He closes the door, and the electricity clunks down. The place goes instantly dark. The bars on the electric fire fade from red to pink to a low diminishing amber, like a fast-setting sun. The elements click as they cool, and Arabella says, "God help me." 5. Staffe double-parks the Peugeot, puts the "Police Aware" card on the dash, and strides up to his flat, in a fine row of Georgian townhouses in South Ken. The lightest dusting of snow has fallen during the night. Above, the dark sky seems set to yield more. As soon as he puts the key to the door, he knows Pulford is in, but doesn't expect anything like the scene that is laid out before him. He tries to school himself not to react, but he can feel his pulse accelerate away from him. His breath is short. His fingers have wound into fists. "What in God's name?" "Staffe, you said—" Pulford stands up, knocks a pile of poker chips to the floor, and one of his friends clumsily tries to catch them. There is a thick pall of spirits in the air, and bad rock thuds from a boombox. They have been smoking, and pizza boxes scatter the living room floor. "You said you were away for the whole weekend." "You said you were knocking this on the head." Staffe steps towards his sergeant. Only 26, but with his stubble and unkempt hair and gravelly voice, seeming far older. He knows he must look as if he's going to lose it when Pulford's mates drain their glasses. One of them picks up the deck of cards, and another scoops the Jack Daniels. "See you, Dave." "Thanks for the game, mate." "Mate," shouts Staffe. "You're no mates. You know he's got a fucking problem. If you were mates, you'd stay away, not come fleecing him." Staffe turns to Pulford, levels him with a stare, holds it, says slowly, "You prick." "I'm sorry, Staffe. I take you in, and this is what you do. I was winning. Pulford is wide-eyed and bleary, and Staffe sees the cluelessness that most of his colleagues choose to focus on in the young graduate recruit. He quickly loses the heart to tear a strip off him. "Did Chancellor call you?" "I've been working that trafficking case." Pulford takes a step back, shaking his head. "On surveillance for 3 nights straight." When Staffe offered Pulford a place to stay, somewhere safe to fight his gambling demons, there had been ground rules. "Get yourself cleaned up and a bellyful of coffee. You're on duty as of now." "What's happened?" He looks his sergeant up and down, wants to feel sorry for him. Rimmer and the rest of the team should have been in touch with Pulford. The fact that they haven't speaks volumes. Staffe stabs a finger into the chest of the young DS. "You are going to get some therapy." Pulford looks down, shamefaced. "What's happened?" Staffe looks out through the fog at the iced houses with their black railings and shuttered windows. "Why didn't you answer my calls?" "Because you said, sir, that you were away with Sylvie. And if you even tried to talk about work, I had your permission to shoot you." Josie Chancellor puts a tray of bagged evidence on her DI's desk. Janine's just told me about the fetus. It was 6 to 8 weeks. He rests his chin on the flat of his palm. Makari. How do we play this? How old does it have to be before you can run DNA on it? The baby, I mean, says Josie. It's old enough. Have you got that data from the victim's mobile phone? Ah, says Josie. D.I. Rimmer is applying for a warrant, he says. Oh, Jesus! How long will it take? The papers are with DCI Pennington, says Josie. And where's the phone? Josie opens a drawer, picks up a sealed plastic bag with the gold Nokia inside. Staffe looks around the room and hisses to Josie, You keep it with you all the time. And I mean all the time. If anybody calls, you answer it. Pretending to be her. You find out who's calling and where they live. You're sure, sir? And here. He tosses her a field recorder. Record some interference off the radio and play it when you answer. What did she sound like? Oh, she's foreign, is my guess. Break your English when you answer. Say as little as you can. Josie leaves, and Staffe has the place to himself. Soon he is lost in thoughts. This case isn't about him or Rimmer, but the beautiful girl lying butterflied for autopsy. Staffe! DCI Pennington is standing in the doorway, immaculately suited, pencil thin. He says through pursed lips, Christ, man! Looks like you've seen a ghost. I was thinking, sir. Well, think on this, Staffe. I've heard about you barging in on Taki Makari last night. How do you know that? You give this man absolutely no cause for complaint. You're only just off the hook, remember? Staffe looks at the floor and swallows words. Pennington suckered him into the Jadis Golding conviction because the DCI extracted a revised statement from a key witness back in the summer. Staffe shouldn't have covered up for his chief, but he did. I remember everything about Golding. If you go after Makari, he'd better be the right man, and you'd better have the evidence. I suggest you reappraise. Think of him as living in a castle. A castle. Surrounded by a moat full of eggshells. I'll have the evidence, sir. He thinks of the DNA Janine can summon from a being the size of a grape. Pennington shoots him a warning look. What exactly have you got on Makari? He called the victim. After she was killed. He's withholding evidence. Pennington gives Staffe a withering look. The victim was pregnant. There was a fetus. You'd better hear me, Staffe. Pennington turns on his heel, walks out, head high and back straight. Loud and clear. He doesn't shut the door behind him. You sure we should be going to see Makari, sir? Says Pulford, sitting alongside Staffe in the Peugeot, the list of names and numbers from the gold Nokia in his lap. Keep reading the name, Sergeant. A mobile number, name, Crystal. No, says Staffe. Landline, Inner London, name, Bobo. Mark it. Staffe knows that in time all these numbers will be traced, but he's picking the men who have called the dead woman in the past week, prioritising landlines for speed. You find your killer in 72 hours. After that, the tide turns against. Darius Accourt, mobile number. Contract? I'll check. Pulford carries on to the end of the list. Staffe says, get Josie to come up with the addresses and full names. He parks up 4 doors down, opposite Macari's place on Mount Street. It is midday, but the lights are on in the house. With such fog in Mayfair's Georgian Preserve, you wouldn't blink if a horse and carriage drew up, if a gent in tails trotted out with a cane. You couldn't call Macari a gent. Not in Staffe's book, but he had clearly got into the right club. Somehow. "Here we are, sir," says Pulford, reading from his BlackBerry. Staffe is sad at the thought of bookies getting rich on Pulford's misery, and wonders what is so lacking in the young man's life as to send him down that road. "Go on. Let's have it." "Bobo is a Boris Bogdanovich, lives in the Attley, Bethnal Green." "Russian. Find out how long he's been in the country." "Darius at court is pay-as-you-go, but one of the landlines is the Colonial Bankers Club." "Is that it?" "The gold Nokia was bought in Dubai. It's pay-as-you-go and chipped, and there's no correlation of the corpse with missing persons." Colonial Bankers. How pucker can you get? Staffe looks up at Macari's apartment. He's had it 5 years since he came over from Istanbul. He paid £1.5 million for it, but that's nothing compared to his house on the Bosphorus and the nightclubs his wife still owns over there. She makes the Mayfair gang look nouveau riche. Some might think Macari a spiv, but his wife's family has been doing it since the Ottoman Empire came home to roost. Staffe starts the engine. The wise thing. The next time he fronts up to Macari, he'll have evidence. "Let's visit this Bobo." Pulford's BlackBerry beeps with another message. "It's Janine." He ruffles his hair and says, "The forensic archaeologist says your woman was East European, the cranium, the eyes, and the contents of her upper intestine." "Lovely. Beetroot and herringbones. She had one of her teeth capped, a classy piece of dentistry apparently, but no match so far." "Tell Josie the victim was East European." He sees a woman at a window on the first floor. She has full lips and olive skin, the darkest eyes which appear to have smudged their mascara. Josie hears the vibration before the ringtone. She looks at the gold Nokia. "The carnival is over," chimes up, and she wishes Staffe was here. Bobo calling. Trying to calm herself, Josie turns on the interference track on the field recorder and places a tissue over the mouthpiece. Click screen. "Lena?" says a man's voice. He is foreign. Josie says nothing. "Lena, are you there? Hello?" The man is agitated and sounds young. He says something Josie cannot decipher, presumably Russian or Polish. "It's me," says Josie, softly, ironing out her vowels. He continues in a foreign tongue. Josie says, "In English, Bobo." "Where are you?" says Bobo. "You practice," says Josie. Rimmer comes into the room and she waves him away, but he paces around her. "What you doing?" says Rimmer. "Is it for her?" "You come over, Lena. You come to me, I'm worried. He knows," says Bobo. Josie checks the prompt Staffe gave her, says, "Who knows?" "Chankov, you know." She scribbles the name, her heart thudding. Rimmer puts the palm of her hand to his forehead. The phone has gone quiet, and Bobo says, quieter, more circumspect, "Lena? Lena, is this you?" Staffe said to trust her instincts, and she removes the tissue, turns off the interference, says, "Bobo, I'm sorry, this is not Elena." "What happens?" He immediately sounds more afraid. "Was Elena in danger, Bobo?" He cries out like a baby. His breathing is heavy, irregular. "We are police. We can help you." "They kill her." "Who is they?" He begins to wail. "Where does she live?" says Josie. But all she can hear down the phone is the low sobbing. "Bobo? Bobo, what is her name? Her surname?" But the phone clicks dead. Rimmer peers at her notes and sits down, says, "Chankov." Josie phones Staffe, says, "Bobo Bogdanovich just called on Elena's phone, sir." "What did he say?" "He knew Elena was in some kind of danger. He mentioned someone called Chankov. He said this Chankov knew something." "Anything else?" "He broke down, sir, cried like a baby." "Did you tell him she was dead?" "He guessed it." "He didn't know already?" "I'd say not." "Would he have called her if he knew that?" Staffe says, a good ruse if he realised he had left her phone at the scene with him trapped inside it.
End of Disc 1. Disc 2.
6. Snow falls steadily on the city. Staffe knocks on the door of Bobo's peeling deck-access council flat on the Atlee and stamps his feet to keep warm, as he waits for a fragile-looking fellow, probably from Poland or Russia. Josie had said he had a tiny voice, like a girl's. The locks clatter back, and the handle turns. The door swings violently open, and Staffe finds himself looking into the broad-vested chest of a brute. The vest sports a gold skull on a Chelsea blue background, with headhunters writ large. Staffe casts his eyes slowly up, taking a step away as he does. The man has a neck like a 30k dumbbell weight, a face like a 20k. His scalp is shiny, the nose broken and the eyes red, raw, glistening with grief. "Are you police?" he says. "Are you Bobo?" says Staffe, off guard. "She's dead. Tell me no. Tell me it is not so." He talks in fits, starts again with the sobbing, gasping his words out like a child who has fallen badly, is still in shock. "I killed the fuck. I killed the fuck." "Who's dead, Bobo?" You don't often get moments like this, when the bad guys are on the back foot, when the strong are weak. So Staffe walks up to the brute, crossing the threshold to the flat and saying, in his softest voice, raising it a pitch, as close as he can to Bobo's falsetto, "Tell me about Chankov, Bobo. I can help." Staffe reaches up with his hands and puts them on Bobo's shoulders, like laying hands on weathered gritstone. Bobo has scars all over his head, some deep and long, some fine. It is like the surface of an old and neglected windscreen. "My Lena," he mumbles. "Lena who, Bobo?" "My Elena," he says, the words petering to nothing, and Staffe sees Bobo's head come towards him. Staffe closes his eyes, raises his fists, readies himself to fracture his knuckles on this man of rock. But Pulford shouts out, "No, sir! No!" Staffe feels a great weight on him, and opening his eyes has Bobo's face in his, the great weight of the man pushing him down. "He's passed out, sir," says Pulford, on his haunches, trying to hold Bobo up. "Well, get hold of him, sir," he wheezes. "He's crushing me." Staffe puts his arms as far around Bobo as he can, gripping him under one arm and pulling him off Pulford. He tries to lower him gently to the ground, but Bobo crumples to the concrete, makes a sound like a side of beef slapped onto a butcher's block. Staffe and Pulford look down at him, then at each other. "What the hell do we do now?" says Pulford. Staffe peers into the flat. "You watch him." "You sure, sir?" "Sometimes you've got to take sweets from the baby." "Some bastard baby, sir." The Attley is rough, but Bobo's living diner is painted a rich, high-glazed plum, with a long glass dining table and high-backed chairs with pale pink silk-skirted covers. The kitchen is simply one wall of black units and steel appliances. It is sleek, and Bobo for sure keeps it spick and span. Above the stereo is a large black-and-white photograph of the beautiful woman, Elena. She is laughing, and her fair hair is blowing back. She crinkles her eyes against the sun and looks beyond the photographer, as if seeing something unintended. Behind her, white horses in a high breaking sea. At the corners of her mouth, the smile fragments. There is a notepad on the marble counter. The top sheet says, "Streccia, V.B." Staffe lifts it daintily with the very tips of his thumb and forefinger, as if the sound of the paper might wake the dead. The next sheet is blank. "V," he whispers to himself, "as in Vasily. Vasily as in Chankov. V.B." He glances back down the hallway, where Pulford looks anxiously up from Bobo, gesturing insistently for Staffe to come, be done with this trespassing. But Staffe sees there are 2 more rooms to inspect. The first is the bathroom, boasting nothing untoward in its mirrored cabinet, save 2 gram bags of what he assumes to be coke. There are 2 bottles of prescription drugs, one an antihistamine, the other an antidepressant, Molaxin. "V," says Staffe, making his way into Bobo's bedroom. He closes the door and drops to his knees, lifting up the valance. Under the bed is a folded-down rowing machine and some weights. Staffe looks in the drawers by the bedside and smiles to himself. Wrapped in black silk ribbon, a stack of letters written on thick, pale lilac paper, almost parchment. Luckily for them, Bobo is a romantic, and his girlfriend, according to the second sheet, is a girl called Elena. Was a girl called Elena. Staffe sits on the edge of the bed and begins to read, but the script is foreign, written in a long and beautiful hand. He knows that if he comes back for the letters, armed with a warrant and a translator, Bobo may well have disposed of them. So he looks at the dates and selects 2, puts them in his pocket, and begins to tie, but he hears a creak. The vast bulk of Bobo fills the bedroom doorway. "What the fuck?" says Bobo, reaching toward Staffe, who shuffles back on the bed, working out whether, if he can roll away from the first punch, he can get away. But Bobo, quicker than thought, flicks his fingers into Staffe's throat. Staffe can't breathe. He clutches at his neck, dropping the stack of letters. Bobo picks up the letters and kicks the door shut in the face of the advancing Pulford. "You read these letters?" he sobs. Staffe can smell Bobo's breath as he speaks. Fish and pickles and woe. "Elena had her own place. Where is it, Bobo? I have to know. If you save me time, it will help." Bobo raises his hands to his head. He moans. "Livery, she calls it." Livery buildings. On cloth fair, says Staffe. Now you'll leave me. Do you work for Vasily Chankov? Bobo drops his hands. Despite his bulk and the scars, Bobo's face is washed over with fear. The blood drains from his face and he looks to the floor. He mumbles, "You go." Did Elena know any bankers? Go. She called the Colonial Bankers Club the day it happened. Leave me. His voice breaks down. Bobo looks up, as if it takes his last drop of strength, and he reaches for the bed. He sits, lets all his weight go, and curls up like a fetus. Just because Bobo called Elena and let us keep a couple of letters doesn't mean he's not a suspect, sir, says Pulford, sifting through the Company's House secure access files on Vasily Chankov's declared businesses. V.B. Staff's finger rests in the margin of the page, next to Vod Blue. The registered address is in Jersey. You saw how much he loves her. He's not our killer, he says, typing in vodblue.com. What if the fetus wasn't his, says Pulford. Perhaps you have to love somebody enough to be able to kill them. Does this look like a crime of passion, says Staffe, looking at the Ice Bar's homepage. He goes to the window and looks up towards Cloth Fair, trying to pick out livery buildings and Elena's flat. It seems that Vod Blue is owned by a company registered in Jersey, run by somebody called Desai. It turns over $9 million a year. We should go to Elena's place, says Pulford. Chankov will soon get wind of our visit to Bobo. If we move quick, he might not know Elena's dead. He'd know if he killed her. Why would he kill her? I don't know, sir. So let's go talk to him. Staffe tosses his car keys to Pulford and makes his way down through the building, scrolling through his phone menus to find the number of his old mucker Smethurst over at the Met. We'll keep livery buildings under our hat. I don't want Rimmer rummaging through Elena's life before we can. Making his way down Leadengate's dark corridors and winding stairwells, Staffe thinks of older times when he was the young pup to Jessup and Smet. Pulford rushes ahead, takes the stairs two at a time, and Staffe wonders whether his sergeant will ever be an old dog. Leadengate is unsuitable for modern policing. Never intended to uphold the law, in fact, quite the reverse. It was previously the Saracen's Head, an old inn of bad repute. They spill out into the dungeon-like reception, and Jombor gives Staffe a sarcastic Amdram salute. Calls out, "Take it easy, Staffe," his head sticking up above the high counter. He is leafing through the news by lamplight. Easy? I don't see Rimmer running at all that fine china. You calling me a bull, Jom? Jombor smiles over his glasses. He is a tall, broad man, piling on the half-stones since he became desk sergeant. At least he's still married, though. You just take it easy. Outside, the snow reflects in a pale orange hue. Smet answers, and Pulford starts up the Peugeot. You can see the shapes of it splutter in the chill. Staffe, you old bastard! What kind of trouble are you in now? Says D.I. Smethurst. It's the season of goodwill, Smet, don't you know? Staffe presses 0 on his phone and pulses it 3 times. I've got to go. There's another call coming in. What was it you wanted? Vasily Chankov. Chankov? He's keeping his nose clean as far as I know. He just cropped up on something to do with one of Taki Makari's girls. Well, there was a coming together a couple of 3 years ago. Over what? A gambling licence. Who got it? Neither. Two rabid old dogs in a manger. Staffe presses 0 again, gives it a long beep and says, "Cheers, Smet," clicking off. They park up on Wardour Street, 3 doors down from Vod Blue, which loses £600,000 a year on a turnover of 9 million. That's a lot of vodka amounting to naught. But Staffe's gut tells him that VB was never conceived for profit, but to spit out clean cash and tax credits. VB, says the sign, sculpted from ice, dyed blue. It is so cold out today that the sign doesn't melt at all. In summer, according to the website, they sculpt it fresh every day. 4 doors down from Vod Blue, 2 lean, chiselled and suited men are smoking next to a blacked-out Bentley. Staffe raises a hand to them, is amused when they seem puzzled. As they go in, Pulford's words plume up from his mouth. "Christ, sir! Is this—" He looks around, open-mouthed. "Is this all ice? Even the bar is ice." The girl behind the bar has black hair and powder-blue eyes. She wears a polar white fur hat, a cropped quilted gilet that shows her tummy, and knitted hot pants. Staffe wonders how long her shifts are. She looks happy enough, and holds up a cone of black ice with the bottle embedded within. She wears white leather gloves, jiggles the bottle. "Absolute, gents. Today's special." "Water," says Staffe. 2, please." The bar is full of small groups of media types in thick vintage coats and pork-pie hats or berets. One of the barmaids jokes as she goes out, cigarette at the ready, to get warm. Pulford brings the drinks, and Staffe keeps an eye on a door between the end of the bar and the toilets. It is the only place that might accommodate an office, and, soon enough, a small, wiry man in a suit emerges. He has dyed black hair with a widow's peak and electric blue eyes, like beads pressed into deep scars. He comes across to Staffe and says, "You gentlemen have everything you need." "Elena sent us," says Staffe, scrutinizing the reaction. "Elena," says the man, convincingly deadpan. "A friend of Vasily's? Maybe you should go." The man takes a hold of Staffe's elbow. The grip is tight as a nut, and Staffe shakes his arm, can't shift it. Pulford takes a step towards the man, but Staffe says, "This place does all right, I suppose. But you're not turning over 9 million a year, no way. Maybe we'll have the DTI look at things." "You have a strange attitude, coming into my bar with such menaces," says the man, in a clipped Eastern brogue. He turns to the hot-panted girl. "Bring the gold bison." "Mr. Chankov," says Pulford. "Vasily. Now." He places a hand on the small of Staffe's back. "Elena, you say?" "She is with one of yours, Bobo Bogdanovich," says Staffe. The girl brings the vodka and 3 glasses. Chankov tips her £10 and she strokes his arm, whispers something in his ear that makes him smile. "Bobo does a little work for me." "And Elena?" Chankov shrugs. "You have any dealings with Taki Makari?" Chankov smiles, blinks rapidly as he pours the vodka, as if his ice-cool bravado might have a thin surface. "We are different kettles of fish, him and me." "You've crossed swords." He hands Staffe and Pulford a glass each. "I don't believe in weapons, Inspector." "Bobo is very upset." "What has she done now?" Staffe sips the vodka. It is ice-cold and has herbal hints of the prairie. He watches Chankov drink his in one and notices an emerald ring on the little finger of his right hand. The ring. Your intaglio. It's from the Urals. Chankov nods, and his smile tightens. She was a bright girl, ambitious. Was? What was her name, her surname? All I can tell you is she loves her work, Inspector. No matter what you hear from anyone, I know this for a fact, and that's a risky business. Staffe molds what he knows about Chankov from the couple of hours' research back at the station. That he has a house on the Bishop's Avenue, a yacht in the Western Med, hunting lodges in Belarus. He left Russia with a modest fortune from pyramid-selling bearer certificates in his cousin's computer business. Vasily was moved on when his uncle, Ludo, ran for governor. You take your share of risks, Vasily? Chankov laughs, takes hold of Staffe's glass with his right hand. I like you. Pulford's phone beeps and he studies the screen. Both men look at him, frozen for a moment. We have to go, sir. Chankov leans in, alcohol fresh on his breath. You were right about my ring, very clever. But you're looking in the wrong place. Take my word for it. Oh, find out for yourself. But don't come round my place fucking things up. I know my rights. And Elena, you knew her? You can go now, says Chankov. I have things to do. I'll go as I please, and I'll come as I please, Mr. Chankov. We shall see. Chankov turns his back, goes back into his office, presumably a warm place. 7. Flecks of snow float between the buildings on Clothfair. Staffe mounts the curb outside the Hand and Shears, where Josie is waiting for them. He looks across to St. Bart's Church with its flint patchwork stone and its dark garden cloister. Inside the Hand, the chatter is low and gentle. Josie is in the back snug, its walls panelled in dark wood. Staffe nods at Dick behind the bar, big-bellied in a Jermyn Street shirt and links. This isn't a police pub, and although the regulars know he is a copper, no mention is ever made. Have you settled things at Livery Buildings? Says Staffe to Josie. She nods, finishing off a tomato juice. I've had a chat with the caretaker, a bloke called Miles. I said I was a friend, and he said he hasn't seen her for a couple of days, and nobody's been round for her. We'll go over as soon as we're done with Pennington. What's agitating him? He just said to get hold of you, and quick. He said, fuck her, actually, sir. And Rimmer was with him. She looks at Pulford, smiles thinly. It seems to Staffe that Pulford and Josie might be sharing a private joke. Not the only thing they've shared, he reckons. Fuck her, you say? What did you make of our friend Bobo? Asked Josie. Is he a sweetie? Hardly, says Pulford. But he's the boyfriend, all right. I wouldn't want to cross him, especially if the baby wasn't his. Sergeant Pulford reckons Bobo is our man, says Staffe. I'd better be off. Have you got those addresses from the numbers in Elena's phone? Josie slips in the list, and in exchange he hands her Elena's pale lilac letters to Bobo. Get these translated, would you? Quick as you can, and keep them away from Rimmer. Let's meet back here at 6. On his way out, the landlady, April, bumps into Staffe. She is a decade or so younger than her husband, Dick, with impossibly blonde hair and dun breasts. She cracks with the locals about Staffe being all over her, in a mole's twang, and getting a laugh from them all. You off, Staffe? She says with a lingering smile. I'll pop in later, when Dick slopes off for his nap. She shakes her head and puts a finger to her lips. Shh, he don't know nothing. Rimmer is sitting smug on Pennington's right. Staffe drags a straight-back chair from the corner of his chief's office. I don't want a mountain out of a molehill here, Wagstaff. All we have is a body. I can't dress it up as something it's not. A prostitute, says Rimmer. She was a coke addict and probably a Russian. She was seeing one of Vasily Chankov's boys, says Staffe. Bobo Bogdanovich, says Pennington, as if he wishes he didn't know such things. She was a trick gone wrong, if you ask me, says Rimmer. This wasn't done in the heat of passion, Rimmer. Did you see the look on her face? You call that a trick gone wrong? Rimmer smiles, for his and Pennington's benefit. He turns towards the DCI as if seeking permission to go ahead. The likelihood is he is impotent. Sex crimes are often committed by men deficient in that area, unable to do the deed. He becomes furious and kills her. This is what stimulates him. It's why he leaves her naked. It gives him the upper hand, a last word. This wasn't a sex crime. Then why was she naked? Who have you been talking to? They left her phone. That's not a professional job. It's a crime of passion, I tell you. Staffe thinks about this. He looks out of the window. She was killed in an instant, not during a struggle. The snowflakes are getting thicker, heavier, falling fast to ground now. Pennington leans back in his chair. When he is impatient, he goes the opposite way. He talks slowly, enunciating each syllable. We shan't make this case something it is not. Bear in mind what she was and where she came from. I know full well who lurks in the wings here, Staffe. You need to hold this in check. This isn't a sex crime, sir, says Staffe, making to leave, and I won't pretend it is. She's a prostitute, man. When I see a prostitute, a high-end, dead prostitute like Elena, I think about power and money, not sex. Staffe thanks Miles, the caretaker, for letting them into Elena's flat. Miles is modestly built, with wiry grey hair in an expensive cut, and with dandruff drifts on the shoulders of his dark suit. He hands them a master key once he has studied Staffe's warrant card, jotting down the details in a spidery hand. Elena's place is on the New York model, exposed brickwork and high ceilings. On its surface, the flat is unstained as to the business she conducted here. You wouldn't bring just any stray Tom into this place, even if Miles was in on it. The living room has 2 vast windows onto the arching wrought iron of Smithfield's meat market. Staffe pulls on his disposable crime-scene mitts and counts the years he has been in this neck of the woods. He will come to the market with Jessup for a fry-up and a few pints of Guinness at 6 in the morning, after a surveillance vigil or a long night of incident-room follow-up. In the wastebasket by the sideboard, there are a couple of envelopes addressed to Elena Dania, and Staffe hands them to Pulford. Dania, he says. Elena Dania. It is good in the mouth, this name. It rolls in the ear, makes Staffe feel sad, the tragedy a little more coloured in. Staffe realises with a heavy heart that before they are done he will probably know more about poor Elena and her world than her lover and her mother, and maybe even herself. There's one here for Makari too, sir, says Pulford, wiggling a letter in the air. It's from the management company. So, he picked up the bills. Leave the place as we find it, Pulford. and tread gently. The bedroom smells of fabric softener. The linen is Egyptian cotton, ivory with bands of navy and powder blue. Translucent Roman blinds keep Elena's bedtime world a secret. She has what seems to be a Clarice Cliff lotus jug on her painted French chest of drawers, but when Staffe inspects the piece, he sees it is a modern copy. In the matching painted wardrobe, her clothes hang neatly, the kind of finery you would expect of a fancy whore. But Staffe double-checks. No mirror, not even on the wardrobes. Picking up a silver-framed photograph of Elena in a ball gown, looking into the camera with her pale eyes and her china fine bones, it makes his heart sad to think she didn't appear to like looking at herself. "Not your typical hooker's joint," says Pulford. Staffe sits on the bed and sighs, "Not by a long chalk." He feels something stop the mattress from taking his full weight and looks under the bed, pulls out a suitcase. It has ED inscribed on its fawn kid leather. He carefully picks his way through the contents. A pair of faded 501s, not even washed, 2 lumber check shirts, a cable-knit sweater, and a crocheted tea-cosy hat. 2 pairs of colour-run Marks & Spencer's bikini briefs, and a copy of Mansfield Park. "Poor thing," says Staffe. "What's that, sir?" "This was her," says Staffe. "Not Makari, not Bobo, not the bastard she slept with. You heard what Chankov said? He said she loved—" "What does Chankov know?" says Staffe, going into the kitchen. He finds nothing out of the ordinary, sees the washing machine is full. On his knees he goes through it, only bedding. She must have washed that day, he thinks. You wouldn't wash. It wouldn't be the last thing, he says to himself, looking at this human remain of her final day. "Excuse me?" Miles, the caretaker, stands in the doorway of the kitchen with his arms crossed. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "A woman died, Miles," says Staffe. "No woman lived here." Miles looks at Staffe awkwardly. Staffe takes a step towards. "Are you changing your tune?" Miles retreats back into the hallway. "I shouldn't have let you in." Staffe wants to grab the man by the lapels of his suit and rattle the truth from him, but he tries to conjure another way. "She was quite a beautiful girl, wouldn't you say? And popular." "I don't know what you're talking about." "You turned a blind eye. And a healthy profit, no doubt." "Perhaps I should call the police. You don't act like police." Staffe notices a stack of writing paper on the shelf of the telephone stand, pale lilac and stiff as parchment. He picks up the phone, presses redial, and after 3 rings, a woman with a stern Balkan accent says, "Signet Hotel, can I help you?" "You have a reservation in the name of Danya." The phone goes quiet, and Miles says, "I must insist." Staffe holds out a hand and listens to the woman say, "You are not her." "Is it for tonight? I am police." "For 2 nights. She did not appear." Staffe hangs up and leaves. As he passes Miles, busy now into his mobile phone, he hisses, "You wash your hands well tonight. Get under the nails, and try not to look in the mirror." In the Hand and Shears, Staffe reads the translation of the first of Elena's letters to Bobo. "My sweet Bobo, I'm trapped here in this palace he has made for me. More like a prison, and sometimes I really wish I had never come. But the life here can be so good. It is easy to forget what it was like before. I can't remember how cold it was and what we did not have. There was nothing beautiful around us. Were the mountains beautiful, Bobo? When I have to do things, I close my eyes and I try to think of the mountains. Life would be easier if they were not beautiful. Today I feel low and missing you. I love you, my Bobo. Elena. Staffe takes an unhealthy swallow of his adnams. Reading Elena's thoughts, he is prompted to think of Rosa, his friend, who is bright and attractive, and who will soon be too old to do what she does. He steers himself to the next translation, but by the time he has read the first paragraph, his mind is back on Rosa. He should go round. It's been 6 months, and he remembers full well what happened the last time. A first time. "What do you make of it?" says Josie. "It doesn't suggest she was being coerced, or held hostage to some habit. What did forensics come up with at livery buildings?" "Just a few of Elena Danya's prints, and Makari's too. According to the caretaker, she was just there for a few days. Makari took pity on her, apparently. The caretaker backs it up." "What about the other residents?" says Staffe. "They're saying nothing, and the CCTV is broken." "Are there any tapes?" "They only keep them 48 hours. "How convenient." Staffe feels his face soften into a smile. "You should smile more often, sir," says Josie, as Pulford returns with the drinks. "There's plenty we should all do more often." "Word has it you're getting quite serious with Sylvie." She raises her eyebrows. Staffe allows that strain of conversation to fade to nothing. As it does, a plan drifts. He swallows his adnams, allows the plan to ferment. Dick keeps his beer perfectly. They make it up in Saltborough, Pulford. What do you make of it? "It's grand, sir. That's where she was going. The Signet Hotel." "Well, you should get yourself up there. You want to go with him, Chancellor?" says Staffe to Josie. "Nice of you to offer, sir, but I can see you might be better equipped to make such a sacrifice." She laughs, as does Pulford, and Staffe revisits the second translation. "My sweet Bobo, I feel so low and miss not seeing you. I am a prisoner up here, and don't know how much longer I could have done this. Perhaps it is the winter that brings me down. He has said I can have a few days away, and I will go to my paradise and forget everything, I hope. I can't remember how long it is since I saw you." Staffe finishes his pint and stands. "You get off, Pulford. We've got a big day tomorrow. Josie, tell Bobo he'll need to account for his whereabouts between 4 and 6 o'clock on the 7th. As Pulford gets his coat, Staffe winks at Josie and taps his watch, holds 5 fingers up and mimes the turning of a steering wheel. "Christ, sir! Is this his place?" Curbside, the Bishop's Avenue, and the dashboard dies like someone turning off the Christmas tree lights. Opposite, though, beyond the gilded gates of number 75, Chankov's Norwegian spruce would do the Kremlin proud. Ooh, what a tree! Josie's eyes glint as a car sweeps by. Staffe talks into the entry phone, embedded in a vast stone pillar. "You!" responds Chankov's voice. "I'm going to have to ask you to come down to the station, Mr. Chankov, or we could try to handle it here." "And may I ask why?" Staffe looks at Josie, letting the silence stretch. The lock clunks, and a small gate to the side sweeps open. "Wow," says Josie, going ahead, looking up at the double-gabled modern Gothic extravagance. "The ruble must be strong," says Staffe, watching light glow bright in the 12-foot porch. The front door opens and little Chankov appears, wearing a smoking jacket and a fragile smile. Through narrow lips that barely move, he says, "I have guests arriving. Unless you have documents, you should be quick." "I thought you'd want to know." Staffe looks past Chankov, sees a suited, broad-shouldered man with Mongolian eyes and no hair, dyed black sideburns. "No? What?" asked Chankov, instating a broader smile. "You're needed to identify the body of Elena Danya. 8 o'clock sharp, I'll send a car round for you." Staffe scrutinises the reception hall, decked with holly and some fine Baroque furniture. On the secretaire by the curving dual staircase is a pile of post. Amidst it, a pale lilac envelope. Vasily steps across into Staffe's eyeline. "I heard Bobo was attending to the identification." "We have a conflict. Bobo simply can't do that, Vasily." "Why?" "He's been arrested in connection with the murder of Elena Danya." Vasily Chankov bats his eyes just the once at the news that one of his has been brought in for murder. "What the hell's going on, sir?" asked Josie, once the car door is shut. "I'll run you home. You're on my way." He fires up the engine, pulls out, waving at the Mongolian, who watches them from the other side of the gilded gates. "You've got evidence on Bobo?" says Josie. "If we wanted him to come in and he refused to cooperate, we might have to arrest him." "Chankov will soon find out if he's not." "John Boar's got 2 uniforms going round to get him. My guess is he'll resist." Traffic is thin and the snow is falling. Going down past the Spaniards Inn, you might be in a 50s movie. Josie turns in her seat and says softly, "You just want Chankov in front of the body. That's it, isn't it?" "Not quite." Staffe turns on the radio, surfs it to a classical station. Copeland, he thinks, and in that orchestral prairie sweep he lets his thoughts roam. All he has for Elena is a disputed address and a probable occupation, a surname and a boyfriend, a lover and an ex-employer. No national insurance number or passport, no place or date of birth. An empty hotel room awaits her in Suffolk. Chankov said she really did love what men paid her to do, but Staffe won't accept that. Nothing about Elena will be that simple, he fears. He thinks about how long it is since he visited his parents' grave, and he fears for Elena's father and mother, feels the terrible burden of those who survive. He calls Jombo, who asks who he wants to talk to. "You, Jom. I want you to do me a favour." "You must be in trouble, Staffe." "You're my oldest friend in the force now, Jom. You know that, don't you?" "Oh, big trouble," laughs Jom. "Your father was in the Russian army, right?" "Only by accident. He was a Pole. They conscripted them." "I've got Vasily Chankov coming in tomorrow. He was in the army, an officer in the First Chechen War." "So?" "I'll bring in some cheesecake. Share some slices with him and chew the fat, have a little dig around." "What do you want, Staffe, exactly?" "To find out just how bad a bastard he is." That First Chechen War is a good place to start." 8. Sylvie is on the chaise longue at Queen's Terrace, a nest of newspapers and sketches all around her. "Stranger," she says, seeing Staffe come in. Pulford is in the armchair, a copy of the news and cans and a pizza box at his feet. He must see Staffe's lip curl, because he gets up and gathers the detritus. "Sorry about this," he says. Staffe sits at Sylvie's feet and rubs her calves. She nestles deeper, lifts her legs onto his lap, and Staffe takes Elena's letters from his pocket, rereading the second one as Pulford scuttles out of the room. He loosens his tie, says to Sylvie, "What do you make of this?" He hands her a lilac letter. "Just these lines." He taps the paper. "I feel so low and miss not seeing you. I feel like a prisoner up here and don't know how much longer I could have done this." As Sylvie reads aloud, he closes his eyes and drinks her voice like a digestif. But she falters, and when he opens his eyes, her face has turned sad. Her eyebrows pinch together. "She knew an end was coming," she says. "Really?" Staffe knew he had missed a nuance first time around. He wonders what else might have stared him in the face, only to be missed. Sylvie says, "Could have done this." "It might just be that she's going to have the baby," says Staffe. "No, she doesn't mention a baby," says Sylvie. "And this is a letter to her boyfriend, right?" "What does that mean?" "It means she didn't know about the baby when she wrote the letter." "In which case she's giving up on something else." "Or she knew about the baby and had decided she wasn't going to have it," says Sylvie. Staffe sighs. "Is it getting to you?" Sylvie runs her fingers through his hair. "Lovely paper, though." Staffe recalls the lilac correspondence on Chankov's secretaire, puts the letter away, and his fingers linger on the box in his jacket pocket. If Pulford was on the other side of the wall, he might offer the ring up. He looks into her emerald eyes and can't remember the last time he read a book. Had an early night, woke up fresh as a daisy. He stretches out flat between her legs, his head resting on her tummy. Sylvie reaches for the TV remote and flicks through the channels, finally resting on University Challenge. Staffe can't see the screen, but he surrenders to the cadence of questions and answers, the starters and bonuses. He says in a low voice, "You never talk about your university days. I bet you had a ball." "You mean boyfriends?" "Well, you didn't go short." She pokes him on the shoulder. "I know that for sure." "You can tell me," he says. "I only had one, really." Staffe tries to remember if they've had this conversation before. She says, "I was a bit of a mess back then, what with my mum and everything." He is jealous that she had only one, and before he can help himself he has said it. The idiot. "Is that where you met Ollie?" "Ollie?" "From the Randolph." "Don't be an idiot, Will." Rebecca slides out of bed and feels the nip of the evening, cold as mountain water. She has slept too long after a midnight till 6 shift in Omega. She throws on Mitch's parka, the fur of the hood warm on her face, and she goes through his pockets. It's her money, for God's sake, but once she hands it across, it's his. "To see the both of us right and save you from yourself." But she's already planning to save herself, and tomorrow is her secret day. Her once a week. Like Elena says, it's her money, and she dares anticipate that one day soon she will be more like Elena. Her plans are grand for sure. She feeds a pound coin to the meter and switches on the immersion, then boils a kettle for good measure. While she waits for the water to heat, Bex goes into the bathroom and pulls up the sealant strip, hooks her fingers round the bath panel and tugs it away. She reaches in for the plastic bag, having to get her head right in. The damp clags her nose. Cross-legged on the floor, she empties the contents of the bag into her lap. She has £4,280 in the post office book, with another 100 from Frank tomorrow, and some interest to be tagged on. It's not enough. She doesn't just want a beach and a few spliffs a day. Her designs are on a brand new business, and she reckons she can do it for 10 grand. Clippers and brushes, and a crisp white uniform with royal blue piping and a little car. And some working capital. That's what Elena said, and Ara too. Till the pet grooming trade picks up. She unfolds the certificate, reads that she, Rebecca Stone, is fit to groom domestic animals. It makes her fizz with pride. When Rebecca told Elena what she was planning, Elena had gone all serious. Her eyes crinkled up and her lips went thin, and she said, "We'll see what we can do. There's a chance things might change for me. They could change for you too, Rebecca." Rebecca, she called her. It made Beck sound like a movie star. It's the way her name was meant to sound, but somehow nobody saw it, apart from Elena. Which is why she had resisted all temptations to take a peek into the envelope Elena asked her to keep secret for her. It is marked Privat in Elena's long and beautiful hand. Rebecca aches with curiosity to see what is inside the A4 manila envelope, but she won't. Not so far. She wonders how Elena's getting on up at her secret sea. She wouldn't tell anyone where it was, but Rebecca begged and begged to go with her, and when Elena must have tired of saying no, they went there together. Elena told Rebecca about the elements. They sat on the beach holding hands, listening to the force of the moon and the water, making tides. "Close your eyes, Rebecca," Elena had said. "We are only what we see of ourselves in the dark." Rebecca closes her eyes now, and pictures herself the way she will be for Frank tomorrow, in his old Bentley out in Epping Forest. Afterwards, Frank will take her to the Drunken Duck near Shoebury-Ness, where nobody knows him. And he will watch her eat, say how much he loves her, but not so much that when he tips her the wink and he drops his pudding spoon, she doesn't have to shift up her dress and ease her thighs apart. His treat for the bill, he calls it. The duck's bill. And she will laugh along with him. She wonders whether, if she closes her eyes when he slips down for his gander, it will make her feel better about herself. The kettle begins to whistle, and she runs a bath, then gathers her secrets together. The post office book, and the hand-drawn designs of her calling cards for the pet grooming business, and the name of an estate agent in Estepona. Finally, the Privat envelope she's keeping for Elena. Rebecca is the only person in the whole world Elena could trust with this. Even Bobo. It makes her want to sing, and she returns the kept secret just so. The water running onto the enamel by her ears sounds like the sea in a shell. Like childhood. It'll be warm come March. On the Costa, she thinks, returning her trove to its secret place. Rebecca takes her phone out and dials Elena's number, picturing her by the sea. She's got a new name to test on Elena. She likes tender petting. But the phone rings, and she's just about to hang up, wondering why it doesn't switch to message, when Elena picks up. "Hi, Elena," says Rebecca, upbeat and sitting on the edge of the bath. "What do you think about tender petting? Subtle, innit? And it says I look after them. What do you think? Really?" The phone crackles, and Rebecca looks at the screen to make sure she's got Elena. "Lena? It's me." "Who's me?" "Who's that? Lena, is that you?" The phone goes quiet, then says, "Rebecca." Whoever it is says her name wrong. Her heart judders. Blood rushes to her head and she feels weak. "Don't hang up, Rebecca. Elena is gone." "Gone?" The silence stretches. "She's dead, Rebecca. We need to speak to you. Please don't hang up. We can help." Rebecca acts on instinct, struggling for breath, pressing red. Josie stares at the gold handset, sees "Rebecca call ended." She scribbles down the number and turns off the interference track on her field recorder. If only Rebecca had called when she had been at the station, they could have triangulated and got a fix on where the incoming call had been made. Nonetheless, the name and number tally to a data sheet. Rebecca is an illegitimate pay-as-you-go SIM. Josie calls the technicians, feeds them the number, says she'll hang on while I get into the network. It is dark out and the snow glows neon orange in the street's lights. It is a night to sit by a fire with a lover and a glass and conversations that reach for a better life. But it seems such things are sliding away. She could go out to the butcher's hook and join Copper's corner, laughing and joking about the cases, flirting and winding up. But lately it's not what she wants. Looking back into the hot summer, she thinks about the fling with Pulford and was she right to finish it? At least they're friends, still. And as for Staffe... The technician comes back on the phone, says, "Too late, Josie darling." "Oh, cheers, Connor. Let's hope the next one calls when I'm at the station." "You going down the butcher's?" "Got to go." She hangs up and calls Staffe to let him know about the call from the youngish woman called Rebecca, with her Bow Bells twang and her talk of tender petting. But the ether is a vacuum. Staffe's phone rings and rings and rings, and when she clicks off, her flat is deathly quiet. Darius chops out lines for them all. 6 thin ones from a bag he was going to mix down and sell off later down the Contium Borough. But needs must. Arabella and Rebecca are on the sofa, and thank God Mitch isn't in. The girls have been crying and talking about Elena, and crying and drinking and talking about Elena, but without really talking about Elena, just trying not to be afraid. He does his lines and calls the girls over, swigs from the Absolute and lights up a joint, sits himself down in the corner and tries to work out why he hasn't cried. Reckons it must be a mechanism to protect Ara. Ara looks up at him from doing her lines. She seems absolutely lost, and he knows it is time to get her back to the fold. Poor Ara, he thinks. She and Bex haven't got a prayer. The blind leading the blind, and now the one-eyed queen is dead. What the hell will they do? He takes an almighty draw and wonders if he'll ever really know exactly what Elena was playing at. "What are you thinking?" asks Ara. Darius gives her a hurtful smile. She ought to know he hates that question. Beck says, "I can't believe she's not going to just come in and tell me what she's been tricking. She'd have a bottle, wouldn't she, Ara? And a little something. She always had a little something." "A little something to get her into trouble," says Darius. "And what would you know?" says Ara, wrapping an arm around Bex. "A lot less than you," says Darius. 3 fucking witches." He laughs, isn't proud of himself. Something outside of his body tells him they should be making a better fist of mourning Elena. "I've got to get away," says Bex. "Shh," says Ara. "Don't talk like that, not now." "The Great Escape," says Darius. Ara takes the joint off him. "Didn't your father and Elena," says Bex, taking the joint off Arabella, She staggers back, steadies herself on the table. I forget how we all met. Don't you have to phone in, Bex, says Darius. Rebecca. That's how she said me. Love that. She was the only one knew how to say me. You should call, says Darius. Leave her alone. And now they've killed her, says Bex. You don't know how she died or why, says Darius. We know fuck all, that's for sure, says Arabella. They won't come bothering us, will they, Darry? You should go see your father. I should call Vasily, says Bex. Let him know. Bastard. Darius pulls Arabella onto his knee, and she kisses him hard. Lets him put his hand up her skirt. Doesn't know that all the time his mind is racing, trying to map what is best for him. And doing the same for Ara, hoping Bex can look out for herself. 9. Staffe slams the Peugeot's door, and the engine ticks in the morning dark as it cools. Where are we? Asked Josie, bleary-eyed and sipping from her thermos mug of coffee. This is the humble abode of Taki Makari. Staffe presses Makari's videocom. Too quickly, the Turk's voice emerges from the shiny grill. What the hell are you doing here? Staffe looks into the camera. I would like you to come with me to identify the body of Elena Dania. This is ridiculous. You were her landlord. You can't just turn up here. And the father of her unborn child. If only... The videocom shuts down and the camera clicks off. Staffe smiles at Josie. I think he's coming. Staffe rubs his hands together. Josie is pale as snow and staring into space, possibly fearing for her inspector. Vasily Chankov is in holding room 2 with Jombor, who has been regaling the Russian with tales of his father, serving in the RAF, having escaped a prisoner of war camp in Finland. Staffe leaves Makari with Josie in holding room 1 and taps on room 2. Enters, holding a baked cheesecake. Chankov has responded with an account of his great-uncles from the Ukraine who were saved by the English. They would have been court-martialed as deserters had they returned home to their families. Now they toast England and Churchill. As Staffe serves up the cheesecake, Jombor reminds Chankov the Ukraine was once part of the Kingdom of Poland. But I am Russian, Chankov says, pushing out his sparrow chest, and I have served my country in the First Chechen War. Jombor says, feigning sadness, I am the lost generation, never to serve, born too late. Chankov talks about the treacherous Chechens, and Staffe watches John bite his tongue, knowing what he does of how Vasily Chankov made his money, using his cousin's business to create false bearer certificates. He made a fortune, but it became impossible for him to be allowed to stay. Even in Russia, it seems, slates have to be wiped. Between the lines, Vasily is exiled permanently, war hero or not, and with debts to honour. Jombor stands, makes to leave. Chankov offers his hand, and Jombor takes it, saying something their fathers and uncles would have understood. Once Jombor is gone, Chankov says, Nice fellow. Pity about the uniform. We're a necessary evil, says Staffe, sitting down. Shame on those who make us necessary. Send them to Stalin, laughs Chankov. Now, when are we going to see this body? I have businesses to run. We'll go across soon. Staffe's phone vibrates, and he reads the text from Josie. Says, I have to leave you for a few minutes. Is there anything you want? Some more cheesecake, perhaps. Chankov presents his words as if he hasn't a care in the world, but Staffe sees in the flit of his eyes that all is not well. Vasily cannot afford for his London life to bubble over into a wider domain, to appear on radars in Moscow. Staffe makes his way to the observation room, a glorified cubbyhole with a television monitor and a desk. He leans forward, watches Vasily Chankov. A hiss of white noise comes through the speaker. The door opens and Josie squeezes in next to Staffe. She says, "Makar is being taken in." Vasily Chankov recrosses his legs, picks at his fingernails. Jombo comes into the holding room, followed by another man immaculately dressed with a Crombie draped on his shoulders. Jombo sweeps an arm in the direction of the unoccupied seat. As Makari sits down, Chankov double-takes. Makari clocks his cohabitant, and his mouth drops open. Jombo leaves them to it. The two men regard each other, say nothing. "Christ, it's like who's the first to blink," says Josie. Chankov leans back in his chair, and Makari wrings his hands, eventually says, "You hear about the girl?" "Not my girl," says Chankov. "Are you something to do with this, Chankov?" He shakes his head. "Why would I?" "You should pray you're not." "That's not so friendly, my friend." Makari stands up, and as he advances, Chankov uncrosses his legs and glances up into the camera, makes the faintest smile. Makari grabs him by the lapels and shouts, "I find out this is anything to do with you, you Russian prick! God help me!" Chankov spreads his arms wide, as if to advertise the fact that he is being sinned against. Makari obscures the Russian, appears to whisper something in the ear. Then Makari doubles down, letting go of Chankov and reaching for his nethers. A strangled curse emerges from the speaker, and Chankov stands, still holding Makari by the balls, and whispering something back into the Turk's ear. Makari's Crombie unfurling to the ground. The Russian walks to the door and pounds it twice. When Jombo opens it, Chankov goes into a blind spot from the camera and says to the sergeant, "I think this was not wise. This man," he jabs towards Makari, pausing for effect, "can identify his thought." He steps back out and looks up into camera. "You have no measure of me, Inspector." With Makari slumped back in his chair, gulping for air, Staffe steps quickly out of the observation room and hurries along the corridor. Intercepts Chankov as Jombo is logging him out. "I didn't know you and Taki had an association." Chankov narrows his gulag eyes and brushes his suit smooth. "Be careful not to judge appearances." "Where is she from?" "I don't know," says Chankov. "She worked for you when she first came over, with Bobo." "Elenia isn't what you think. She isn't what I think." He laughs. "And what do you think?" "I think she's a very clever girl." Staffe says, "Her mother should be told, don't you think?" "Families can be strange. It is a shame." "It's a shame when families drive each other away, when people are forced out of their country." Chankov frowns, but before he can reply, a door opens heavily down the corridor, and a uniformed sergeant leads out Bobo Bogdanovich. "Surely Bobo knows where Elena is from," says Staffe, "but for some reason he won't say. Why do you think that is, Mr. Chankov?" "Are you charging him?" "Would it be your business if we were?" Staffe turns to Bobo, eyes bloodshot as beetroot. The sergeant ushers Staffe and whispers, "Not a sausage." Staffe approaches Bobo, smells the pungent breath of sorrow from his mucous mouth and whispers, "Elena's mother should be told. This is just a case of being a decent human being." Bobo looks towards Chankov and shakes his head, slow. You can practically hear his heart sigh. Staffe snaps. "I will need to know where each of you was between 4 and 6 o'clock on the 7th of December. Sergeant, take the statements, get them typed up, and hold them until they're both signed." Chankov reaches into his jacket and produces a receipt for lunch at the Fat Duck. It is timed at 5:15 p.m. "As you will know, Inspector, this is an hour from the city minimum. I have 3 companions, plus the staff, and we share the digestif with the proprietor afterwards." Almost too good to be true, thinks Staffe, returning to the holding room, where Makari stares into infinity. "I really don't know where to start, Taki. I had no idea you and Vasily were so intimate." He picks up Makari's cromlech from the floor, dusts down the shoulders. He sees a hair on the lapel, holds it between the pads of forefinger and thumb. He drapes the coat across Makari's lap and takes a piece of paper from his pocket. Folds it over and again, with Taki Makari's hair trapped inside it. Makari runs a finger along the perfect stitching of his coat, says most deliberately, "I wouldn't distract yourself by reading any significance into what you saw. Are you going to upset everybody Elena knew, rather than get down to the business of finding her killer?" Staffe pulls up a chair, sits right up to Makari. "You set her up in that fancy pad of yours, and believe me, Makari, if you don't tell me why you called Elena Danya on the 7th of December, I'll drive straight round to your wife and ask her. You enter my home without a warrant, and I'll have you suspended." Staffe considers the nature of this threat. To be calmly told that you will be suspended from duty sends a chill to the bone. He wants to ask Makari who he knows so far up the police food chain. But he schools himself that it is better to say nothing. "You sent her to the Thames Bank, didn't you?" He leans forward. "She was leaving you, wasn't she?" "You're in the dark." "I know about her plans." Makari's eyes widen and he looks away, wrings his hands. "I had nothing to do with this terrible thing." "You had everything to do with it, Taki. Your mask is slipping, sir." Makari laughs. "You are an unusual man, Inspector. I hear you don't need this work. I should opt for an easier life." "She said she couldn't do it any more. Do what, precisely?" "You tell me." "Carry your baby? Sell herself? Or is there something we don't know?" "Charge me or release me, Inspector. You have nothing." Staffe shows Makari out, watches the Turk reinstate the cromlech to his shoulders, his back straight, his head tall. Jombor shakes his head, says, "Christ, that's one nasty piece of work." "Chankov," says Staffe. "He was an officer in the First Chechen War, running things the Russian way. He actually said the Russian way, as if I'd respect him for it." "You didn't disillusion him?" Jombor's voice goes down a pitch, quieter too. He shifts forward in his seat, and Staffe notices that his fists have clenched. "He didn't tell me exactly what the scam was, but he was running something." "Like what?" extorting wages from his soldiers, maybe worse. You hear things that would make your blood freeze. John Boar squares right up to Staffe. He could kill that Danya girl, sir, like treading on an ant. Staffe takes out the folded paper from his pocket. Writes on it, T.M. Hare, re Thamesbank. Get this to Janine, will you, John?
End of Disc 2. Disc 3.
10. The sun is low to the horizon, and the morning mist lies above the fields, which are dusted with snow. "There's something odd about this, sir," says Pulford, reading through the list of the contents of Elena Danya's case. He reads it out under his breath. Jeans, lumber shirt, jumper, hat, Jane Austen novel and a notebook, underwear and a toothbrush. No makeup or hairdryer, no perfume or hair straighteners. You don't think she was doing a runner, do you, sir? Staffe watches England go by. When you're in the city, it is easy to forget that this is all on your doorstep, just an hour or so away. He thinks about Makari and his buried emotions. Perhaps he truly loved the real Elena that she packed away for her trip to the sea. The train slows, and the tendrils of a Suffolk village come into view. Red brick Georgian and Victorian houses, a small grid of Edwardian semis laid out like a picnic blanket of tree-lined streets. A lodge with a steep sloping roof, and far away, tall silver birch trees poke at the endless cream sky. Cloudless all the way to the Baltic, it seems. "They're building some stuff here, sir." Staffe looks out of the other window. A different scene altogether. As far as you can see, scaffolding and many towers of porter-cabins. Blockwork skeletons of houses are scattered to the horizon. A 20-metre advertising hoarding welcomes you to Aldersworth Country Town, a market town for modern living. As they pull into the station, the old high street is only 2 lines of buildings, with the spire church and pastel-painted Tudor shops, an old courthouse and a half-timbered Spa mini-market, all higgle-piggle together. Then the fields start again, all the way to the sea. "This is us," says Staffe, standing. "Taxi or bus?" "What would she have done?" says Pulford. "Taxi," says Staffe, pleased his sergeant sees the point of following Elena's footprints to the sand. All the way, the taxi driver chit-chats about the new model market town. "Gerald Holt," says the signage on his dash. "We all thought there's going to be a shot in the arm for us, what with all the jobs it'll create. Good for the youngsters learning a trade. But the place fills up with jam rolls doing all the labouring, and now we find out they're putting up a bloody Waitrose. Progress? I don't know what to think." Pulford says, "Communities need to evolve slowly. It takes history." The taxi driver slows down, turns to look at Pulford and says, peering over his glasses, "You might be right, son. The Signet. That's a lovely place. You been before?" "No, we're meeting a friend," says Staffe. "His friend," jabbing a thumb in the direction of Pulford. "She's called Elena. You might have given her a lift sometime. She's beautiful. You'd remember her. A local girl. She's Russian. They're pretty, them Eastern girls, that's for sure. I do give one of them a run every now and then. Lovely girl. She stays at the Signet, funny enough." "Maybe it is Elena," says Pulford. "I hope not," says the cabby. "Why is that?" The cabby cocks his head, fixes Pulford in his rear view and weighs him up. "Not sure, I should say." "She with another fella?" laughs Staffe. Gerald Holt keeps quiet. They pull up outside the Signet, and Staffe nudges Pulford to get the bags. Once he is out of earshot, Staffe leans forward, proffers a 20, and holds on to it as Gerald Holt tries to take it from him. He knows about the older fella. 'Tis an older fella, isn't it? Foreign. The cabbie nods, says, bloody loaded he is. Always gives me 30. Staffe takes another 10 from his wallet, hands it to the driver. Is she always with him? The fellow in the Crombie? Not lately. She's up here once a month, maybe. Gerald rubs his chin. Crombie. You're right. And how long has she been coming here? Were you going to freshen him up? Staffe shakes his head. It's all been sorted. It's not exactly what you'd think. Couple years, to my knowledge. Not seen him for a while. Have you got a card? Sure, says the cabbie. And ask for room 14. Trust me. They're checked in by an old boy in a waistcoat and stiff buttoned collar. Black tie. He's got the heating turned up so high against the winter cold that he sweats with every movement, and despite Staffe's protestations, he carries both their overnight bags up the stairs. They drop off at Pulford's room first, then go to 14. 14. The number of her apartment in Livery Buildings, and, according to the old boy when he trousered a tenner, the finest room in the hotel. You don't get given it less you ask, and you gotta be in the know to ask. He put a finger to his lips when he had said it. Staffe puts the big old key to the lock. The oak door is thick and heavy, creaking as Staffe stoops under the low lintel. Once inside, it is everything you would ever want. The floor gives out theatre croaks as Staffe treads gingerly across the threadbare Persian rug to one of 2 leaded picture windows. Outside, the beach is empty. The sea and sky a seamless, pale, metallic blue. Milk wisps here and there. The seagulls swoop and rise like loweries. He closes his eyes to the surf and squawk, smells the wood and cloth and ozone. He imagines opening his eyes to see Elena Dania on the window seat, in her lumber shirt and her hair in a careless clasp. Pale eyes, unfocused on the vague horizon, and knees drawn up to her chin. Book downturned and open, a new chapter, but not wanting it to end. He sits on the 3-seater William IV settee at the bottom of the squat bed, swamped in eiderdown, looks around the room, and is swept back through centuries. He pictures a Jane Austen novel unravelling in Elena's head as she drifts to another world, somewhere unreal between the one she left and the one she came to. And he tries to imagine precisely how she came to visit here with Taki Makari, eventually coming of her own accord. Staffe calls room service, orders broth and a ham sandwich, and sets his field recorder to rec, then pause. He heads straight downstairs, knowing the old boy will be in the kitchen. It's the kind of meal he'll rustle himself, but to be on the safe side, Staffe waits around the corner from the reception desk in the musty lounge, head tilted to a copy of Suffolk Life, waiting for the old boy to head upstairs with his order. He'll have 4 minutes, maximum, to go through the register. As he waits, he skims through the Life, not really reading it properly, until he lands on an article about the Aldersworth country town, new model market town. Gerald Holt smiles into camera, with a comment below applauding the development. On the opposite page, the mayor, in full chain of office and holding a silver shovel, shakes the hand of a fellow called Leonard Howard in a chalk-striped suit. Howard, according to the caption, is a prominent Catholic and well in with the Duke of Norfolk, and his local family seat, the Ridings, has been in the family for centuries. Staffe recalls, dusting off some distant titbit, that the Dukes, the Audley Howards, descend from Mary Tudor. As he checks the date of the magazine, which is last June, The old boy totters past reception, holding a silver tray out in front of him, and Staffe strolls casually behind reception. He flicks through the register, skimming the left-hand column and looking for room 14, whispering the date of each of Danya's visits into his recorder. Makari appears in June this year, and from then, back to the previous Christmas, he came each month. Staffe hears the squeak of the door at the bottom of the stairs swinging open and shut, but still he quickly leaps back. He thinks he sees a name he recognises, but realises it is simply the banker from the Life article, Howard. Room 14 also. He must be in the know. He scrolls down again, sees Makari on the same date but in a different room. 23, he whispers into the recorder. 15th of March 2008. One night. What are you doing? Staffe's heart stops for a beat. 2 beats, then races to catch up. He formulates an excuse, but when he raises his head, it is Pulford. With a scold of the eyes, he closes the register and scoots around the desk. Rebecca looks down at Frank, through her hair that has come loose. His eyes are almost closed, eyeballs rolling up. He bites the corner of his lip. Did you hear that? I want to go into you, Becca, says Frank. We've got all afternoon. She leans down to kiss him on the mouth. She knows that she has him any time she wants. But this is the game. This is why he comes to her. She can cusp him for an hour, make him feel like a man. Rebecca cranes her head, looks out of the car all around, into the spruce trees that surround them. They could be adorned with tinsel, strung lights whispering from their ferns. A memory from long ago pinches her cheek. A good fairy or a bad uncle. There's someone watching, she says. This would be no surprise were they here 4 or 5 hours hence, but the dogging lovers don't come until it is well and truly dark. We're alone, says Frank. He puts the palm of his hand on the underside of her breast, lifts it as if for weight, and raises his head, sucks at her. Rebecca continues to look out the window, scanning the perimeter of the clearing in the wood. She tries not to appear perturbed, but thinks Mitch might suspect she is up to something. He's quite capable of telling Chankov about her foreigners. Her debt to Chankov is down to $4,000, but whatever she earns lately seems swallowed whole by the interest. Something moves in the undergrowth, crouched and fast. She shudders. You like that? Says Frank. I feel it inside. She looks down at him, suddenly not wanting to be here one little bit. Sometimes he can look quite dishy, but in this light his skin is grey with wide pores and a fag-tar greasy sheen, meat on his breath. You hot and bothered? Rebecca reaches around with her hand and through his boxers puts her fingers between his cheeks. His eyes close and his smile goes serious. She feels him stiffen. She cranes her neck again and sees a man in the second length of grass where the trees get thicker. He's not playing with himself, just watching. Put me in! Put me in! Pleads Frank, losing it. Rebecca takes her hand away from his bottom and slides down into the footwell in the back of Frank's Bentley. She rests her chin on his rubbery dick. His piece is clean and she can barely smell him, just the rich leather of the old Bentley's heated seats. Outside, a dog yaps. Rebecca looks up at Frank. Imagine, when we go away. It'll be soon, won't it? When I can sell the business. It's been a long time. You last the longest time, hey, babes? She runs her tongue down and up, along the shaft of his dick. He grunts. "I love you, Frank." "You just say that, Becca?" he gasps. His eyes are out of control. "You're the only one gets me like this, like I want it to go on forever. Be forever." "Don't talk about them." "Who?" "The others." "I didn't say nothing about no others." Frank sits up, earnest. "It's the implication. You should stop." "I will, Frank. When we go away." "Stop. Then we'll go away." She looks down, sees he has shrunk, and she puts her fingers on him, looks him dead in the eye as she takes her mouth to him, wrapping her lips around her teeth. "You're behaving like a whore." Suddenly she doesn't know what to say. Should she say she wants him inside her? Or all to herself? Or to just give her all his money and fuck off? Or, "I just want you, Frank. Just you. Stop those implications. I told you once." He sits up and pushes her away with the ball of his foot, and she rocks back against the Bentley's door. Frank sits forward, head in his hands. "Get out." "We're going for dinner. We always go for dinner." "Not any more." "Let me have you, Frank." She reaches out, delves for his dick, but he slaps her hand away. "This was the last time, and even that's gone tits up." "The last time?" she says. He looks as if he might equally laugh or cry. "You know, I really did love you, Becca. What kind of a prick does that make me?" He suddenly seems calm, as if a fog has lifted, a clue fathomed. "But what about—" She begins to sob, realising he's serious. She gathers her clothes together, not daring to look him in the eye. "What about? I'm not paying today. Now get out of my car." Rebecca has been in the game long enough to trust her instincts, so she stifles her tears and gathers her clothes. Outside, the cold is fit to freeze. The ground is rough. She scurries to the trees as best she can, like trying to run on burning hot sand. At the trees, she quickly steps into her pants. Frank's car hasn't fired up yet. Perhaps he's changing his mind. She pulls on her top. Frank bought it for her. It is cashmere, lemon, and as it comes over her head it reminds her of summer, that yellow light when you close your eyes tight to the sun. She feels it now and doesn't want this life any more. Her hand is on her. Rebecca screams, but it seems to be lost in the cashmere, and now her hand is over her mouth, and her scream ruptures inside. Then she hears it. Before she feels anything, and through the sound of her own breathing and his grunting and the rustle of her top against her hair, she hears the wet, impossibly loud and flesh-metal slurp coming from her own body. It is her side, she thinks. And then the pain snipes, long and thin. Then the sound again, this time in her back, she thinks. And a wider pain, less sharp, spreading. And the sound. Again. Again. She falls to the ground, away from herself, and the lemon sun slips, and the forest is white. The ground is sharp on her face. Far away a dog yaps. And there is nothing. 11. The sun disappears to Staffe's right, behind the sands, tufted with dunes. Staffe's lungs begin to burn. He is close to the sea where the sand is wet and firm, but it still makes his leg muscles weep. He has come a mile or so south towards Warblingsea, and in the distance he can see the masts sticking up from the harbour. Beyond, the lights twinkle on in the Lord Nelson, on the other side of the reeded estuary. It will be completely dark soon, and the clouds have come in, obscuring the moon. It is not yet 5, but he turns himself round and begins the run back. As he does, he thinks he sees somebody dive to ground at the top of the beach where the dunes run out. He stops, squints into the gloam. The final strip of purple sky burns to nothing, and he walks up the beach to check if his eyes were deceiving him. Nobody is up in the dunes. Staffe has the beach to himself, and even the seagulls have stopped squawking. He is cold now and begins to run again, but the dry sand drags him down, and he runs back to the sea, checking over his shoulder as he gains speed. The sea air saps him, and hunger advances. There is a thin smattering of diners in the Cygnet's restaurant, which is white linen's silver service. A sweet trolley and a Jacobean sideboard for the cutlery. The floorboards groan and the china chinks whenever the waitress passes by. A couple in their 30s are awkward around each other. The male tries to order for both of them, but he is uncertain, failing to catch the waitress's eye. A salesman studiously avoids contact of any kind, squirreling an off-piste treat for himself. A lean man comes into the room, sits on his own, as far away from the others as he can. He looks fit. His face is ruddy, as though he has been exposed to the elements. He seems sure of himself. Laying the napkin on his lap, Pulford sips from his water, says, "All those bookings for her and Markari, it gives you the sense of a real relationship. Markari couldn't have killed her, surely." Staffe downs the last of his pint of Adnam's broadside. "We didn't come here to eliminate Markari, though, did we, sir? You've got it in for him, haven't you?" "I'm going to have oysters. How about you?" The prawn cocktail, then the grilled prawns. I love prawns." Staffe raises his eyebrows. "The oysters are natives." Pulford shudders at the thought, and Staffe pours them each a glass of the Mercure. "I think we should give the ball a kick tonight, Sergeant. This is my treat." The service is slow, and they drink the first bottle before the starters arrive. Staffe orders another, which they drink before pudding. When he suggests a half bottle of Sauterne, Pulford grimaces on the first sip, says it's sickly sweet, which makes Staffe laugh. He says, "And you're the one supposed to have the education." "Where exactly do you think I'm from, sir?" "Just Mr. First in history and politics from Durham. You captained the first 15 at your public school. God knows why you wanted to join the police." "There was no silver spoon." Pulford looks serious. His eyes are glassy, his mouth slack. "You should make more of an effort to get on with people." "Like you." "You'll have a glittering career if you play the game right. You want to play the game, don't you?" "I'll be true to myself, if that's all right, sir." Staffe leans back, puts the fork and spoon across the remains of his lemon tart. "There's better careers, surely." Pulford sips at the pudding wine and says, "When I was 11, I was happy, just me and my mum. My dad had run off with her sister. My mother poured her whole life into me. She fought and fought for me to take this entrance examination, and I walked it. That's how I got into that school. My uncle took us the first term, and I had all my stuff in an Adidas bag and a rucksack. The other boys had trunks with their initials on. When she had to leave me, my mum cried buckets, and my uncle took me to one side and clipped me, said, "You dare show her you're upset." Pulford swallows, takes a moment. She wasn't crying because she was upset, and she'd be going back to an empty house and have no one at all in the whole fucking world. She was proud. Staffe says, "I can be a prick sometimes." That night I had her lipstick on my cheek. I shared with 3 other boys, and that night they got me. Took a limb each and stretched me out. Then an older boy came in. He had rugby boots on. Made a right mess of me. They had to call an ambulance. A policeman came to the hospital. I can remember him now. D.S. Cropper, he was called. And he held my hand like my dad never had. And he said I could press charges if I liked, but these boys had a story and will probably get off, and I'd have to do my time at the school or leave. Then he leaned right up to me. His voice was so soft. He said, "You can get these bastards if you're clever." And one by one I waited for them to step out of line. I grew big, fast. I made my own friends the hard way. He finishes his pudding wine down in one and fills himself up. A smile implies itself. What happened to the boys? D.S. Cropper said to me, "People do you wrong. You sit on the bank of the river, wait for the bodies to come floating by." So I did, and they did. One of the bastards got into Class B drugs. One used to get drink and sell it to the other boys. The older boy, who kicked the hell out of me, was demanding money with menaces. And you let Cropper know. Staffe wonders how he could work with someone and not know these things. Wednesday afternoons we went into town. It was Cropper's jurisdiction. You got them all. 3 out of 4. Expelled. Pulford nods. And the 4th? He's my best mate still. He was there the other day when you caught me playing poker. And that's the beauty of it. Things are never what they seem. There's no simple justice. My mate. They used to beat him up every night till I arrived. You never know, says Staffe, looking away, catching the lean man with the ruddy face watching them. Graham Blears reaches for his dog's lead. It is curled up on the bow-fronted cabinet his mother bequeathed him. The moment he raises his hand to reach for the lead, Useless begins to yap, jumping up and down on her hind legs. It is only 3 hours since they were last out, and little does Useless know that Graham gets so much more out of these excursions than she does. For her, it is merely exercise. Important that he takes full advantage of this day off work. He checks his watch and pulls open the bureau, takes the Durex from the secret drawer and pops it in his pocket. Graham looks in the mirror and ruffles his sandy hair up. For work, he dampens it down, defines the parting the way a mother would. It beggars belief how he can ghost through life so unnoticed. A weaker man might think himself unappreciated, but on balance, the view the world takes of him suits Graham Blears just fine. He knows how to make his marks. He's man enough for sure. As he walks to the front door, he feels a weakness in his knees, pockets of air in his lower stomach. Oh, the anticipation. Outside, the snow is clearing. It will be the longest night soon, and the hippies will come to the forest with their cheap cider and their fires and their makeshift druid priests. But not tonight. Tonight is for normal people. Graham's pulse quickens as he and Useless leave the high street behind them. Within 10 minutes they're through the kissing gate and into the forest. The slow rumble of cars deepens the further he goes along the track. Their lights are dimmed, and the remnants of snow give off a yellow fluorescence. He stops to clip the latex muzzle on Useless. She yaps, doesn't like it, but she is trained not to stray. "Stay here, Use," whispers Graham. He has picked out the Mondeo on the edge of a group of 4 cars. The rear courtesy light is on, and he sees the busy outline of a familiar woman. He stiffens, feels so weak in the knees as the blood rushes to his heart, all round his body. Even in this cold, his fingers tremble. If he was to say anything, which he never has, his voice would quake. Useless goes into the trees, scratches at the leaf mulch in the patches where the snow has faded completely. As he reaches the cars, Graham Blears can hear the muffled coaxing and moaning of people going about their business. On the far side, a man stands outside a Renault Megane, by an opened window, busying himself, arching down to see inside. The Mondeo's rear window glides down, and the middle-aged woman recognises him. "Same," she says softly. Graham nods. "You all right?" she says to the man alongside her. Graham watches as the man puts his large, rough hands inside her blouse. She leans on the open window, her head half in the car, half out, and she shifts herself so her backside juts at her ready companion, who is now up on his knees. Graham peers around her head to get a proper look at the kneeling man as he pushes up her skirt, works himself in. "He likes it rough," says the woman, looking up at Graham. "Don't you, love?" She opens her mouth, half closes her eyes, and Graham unzips himself, puts on his Durex, lest he catch something off this dirty, dirty whore, who looks up at him the whole time that he goes in and out of her mouth. When he is finished, he slopes back to the trees where Useless is still scratching around. "Use," he says in a low voice. "Here, girl." He feels flat. Just wants to be at home now, hating himself for doing the things he does. That will wane. Resurrect. The scratching continues, and Useless whines. "Use," he hisses. "Come here. Now, girl." She responds with a whimper, and Graham thinks something must be wrong. If anything happened to her, he doesn't quite know what he would do. He feels his way into the trees, ducking his head down low, fearful that a branch or twig might have his eye out. The hum of a new car emerges into the clearing, and a slow sweep of sidelights follows, illuminating the shape of Useless just a few feet away. Graham stops dead. Useless has unearthed a girl. But she looks unrecognisable. As a human, the life all gone from her. Just flesh, slitted in her side and stomach. In her face, she seems so afraid. When he had got home, Blears put Useless into his room, upstairs at the front of the house, and began his deliberations. These soon became preparations. He had kept his cool earlier, maintained a silence, and carefully scraped the leaves and mulch back over the body. This was his body. But what to do with it? This evening, Blears has bathed and combed his hair flat. His parting is perfectly defined, and he is dressed in his best suit. He makes tea in the Prince Albert service and pours the milk into the jug. He brings out the sugar tongs, even though it is only him. He should have gone to the castle tonight, but this will make up for that. Indeed, these will prove to be momentous days. He once heard that everybody gets a single chance in life. Graham realises that the same world which can turn a shoulder to him which can look past him on the high street, or at the checkout, or on his occasional sorties to the cross daggers, has today finally beckoned. This is a time to do. He makes a small clap and rubs his hands together. As he gives the tea a final stir and applies the milk and the sugar, he realizes he is trembling. He says aloud, "Why not?" going across to the bow-fronted cabinet. He takes a quarter bottle of brandy, pours himself a half schooner of the 3 barrels, and shifts his chair to look down the garden. He is overlooked at the back, and now they will read about him. He will have to explain why he was in the forest in the first place, but he has a plan for that. And if they don't play it his way, he simply won't tell them where the woman's body is. He sips the brandy and shudders, takes a full swallow of the tea, and looks up at his mother's porcelain Our Lady. Standing, he feels invigorated as he goes to the glazed kitchen door. His knees are rock solid now. His heart is even. He looks out at his neighbour's windows. "Let's do it," he says. Waiting for the phone to be answered, he regards his watermark reflection. First one 3/4 profile, then the other. He settles on the latter. The phone is answered by a woman, not what he had expected. "I'd like to—" "Ambulance? Fire? Police? Yes, please, I must speak to the police. I've discovered a murder, and my name is... Blears looks at the phone and his head thickens. The woman on the telephone sounds ever so distant. She echoes. He will abort, his nerves suddenly seeping all the way out of him. "Mr. Blears? I didn't say that. It's here on my readout. You know it's a criminal offence to make bogus calls to emergency services." "It's a murder, damn you," says Blears, reaching for the chair, dragging it across the linoleum and sitting heavily upon it. "I hope so," says the woman, "for your sake." The oddness of the remark escapes Blears, who foggily prepares how he's going to present himself to the world. 12. Staffe pounds his way along the sea's edge to the southernmost jut of the beach, the sun low above the North Sea horizon. He considers what he has learned of Elena Dania. That she was certainly more than a passing fancy of Taki Makari's. That she developed her own affection for this place, separate from Makari's, who seems to have an affiliation with a man called Howard. By the time he gets to Warbling Sea Harbour, his shins begin to splint and the sweat drips saltily into his eyes. Breathless, he stops, hands on knees, gulping for air and enjoying the burn to his lungs. He stands up, stretches, and lets the wind chill the sweat. When he gets back, he will soak in a hot bath, then stand for a minute under the coldest shower, then have porridge with honey, kippers with a poached egg. He licks his lips, tastes the salt, sees someone in the dunes. He blinks, sweat in his eyes. It is a man watching him. It is the lean, ruddy-faced man from dinner last night, he's sure. He rubs his eyes and looks again, but nobody is there. When Staffe returns to the hotel, he settles his bill with cash, is told that Pulford has already paid for his room and for half the cost of dinner. "Has the ruddy-faced man left yet?" asks Staffe. "I don't know who you mean," says the receptionist. Staffe thinks she might have inquired as to whether he had a name for the ruddy-faced man, or a further clue to describe his appearance more fully. "He is a slender man. He had dinner last night." The receptionist smiles wearily at Staffe, as if it is more than her job could be worth to divulge such a thing. Josie takes the ACL printout to the morning meeting. Today she has ringed only one item on the area crime log, the list of offences committed outside the limits of the city police. It is the death of a young woman aged 20 to 26, 5'4", mouse-coloured hair that had been dyed blonde. She had been killed within the past 24 hours and buried in a shallow grave in the southern reaches of Epping Forest, on the fringe of a clearing which is known to the police as the Kennel. The body was discovered by a Graham Blears, a single 41-year-old actuary who works for Rees Zurich in the city. He has not a single blemish on record and was walking his dog. The woman had been stabbed 6 times. Josie bides her time, and when she gets an opportunity to bring up the Kennel murder, the usual gallows humour percolates, fast as morning coffee. "Mixing business with pleasure here, Chancellor," quips one DS. "You should check it out," retorts Josie. "Everyone should try straight sex at least once." This draws a bigger laugh, followed by a bellow from Pennington, who looks across at Rimmer as if to say, "You should be controlling this lot." "There'll be none of this," shouts Rimmer. He goes red in the face and leans back against the desk at the front of the room, steadies himself. "Now, Chancellor, what are you saying? That this poor girl might be connected to the Elena Dania murder?" He looks at Pennington, who gives him the mildest encouragement in the form of a rueful nod. Josie says, "The body is fresh, and according to the coroner, there's plenty of dental and medical history. 2 gold teeth, appendix scar, and a metal plate in her left leg. We should get an ID later today. There's no harm checking her out, and West Essex CID have said they'd be happy to share." "But is she a prostitute?" says Rimmer. "It's unusual for prostitutes to frequent the Kennel, but she might have been there out of hours, and she had minuscule traces of semen in her mouth. Nothing in the stomach. No signs of recent vaginal penetration, but there is junky scarring to the arms and thighs. Janine hasn't seen her yet, but the local pathologist says if we pushed him on it, he'd hazard she was on the game." With another look towards Pennington, which receives nothing more than a flat smile, Rimmer says, "Follow it up, then. But don't get sucked in." A tempered trickle of testosterone seeps. "That's enough," snaps Pennington, standing, signifying the meeting is over, and as the room empties he catches Josie. "You make sure Rimmer goes with you to interview Blears. This fella's probably going to be a sex pest, you know, if he's been going down the Kennel." "Of course, sir." "Where's Staffe? I take it he's taken Pulford with him?" "He's following a lead, is all I know, sir." Pennington takes a half-step towards her. "You know, Chancellor, this could be a chance for you." He looks up at her, smiles his thin smile. "You're doing well." He touches her elbow with his fingers. Graham Blears wishes he had never told the police about the dead slut from the forest. Now they're coming to his house. How could that be normal procedure? Surely the one visit up to Ilford Police Station, to give his statement, receive his recognition, was sufficient. They were ever so impressed with him up in Ilford and thanked him profusely. His head was spinning so much he can't remember if they commended him for his citizenship. They said something akin to that. But why are they coming down from the city? What the hell did it have to do with them? He can't be too careful, so he has disconnected his computer and put it in the bottom of the wardrobe, covered in blankets. "It's a good job we're one step ahead," he says to Useless, as he passes the door to the dog's room. He looks back into his bedroom, double-checks that the wardrobe doesn't draw attention to itself. His suit is laid out, alongside his brushes and comb. All these years he has kept his head down, gone about his business, tendered his secrets unseen. It doesn't pay to involve yourself with the law. Rimmer fidgets all the way from Ledengate out to Snaresbrook, scribbling in his notebook and checking the notes from West Essex CID. "You spoke to profiling," she says. "Yes. I don't see why we have to come all the way out here. We should have got him into the station." "Staffe always interviews in situ. It gives a fuller picture." "Then where the hell is he, if this is so crucial?" "What did profiling say?" "That killers often try to involve themselves in an investigation. As many as 1 in 4. "But the killer wouldn't report the body, surely?" Rimmer looks at her as if she can't quite be trusted. "Have you met Tara Fleet? Very impressive." Rimmer looks into the middle distance dreamily. "Very impressive indeed." Josie knows Tara Fleet, a criminal psychologist who knows exactly how to play senior police officers, especially the male of the species. Rimmer would be a suitable stepping stone for enhancing her own profile. "Did she say anything about the cases being linked?" "We need to know more about the victims, but a swanky hotel and a dogging site, 10 miles apart, is a difficult one." Josie goes quiet, slows the car a tad, and as they turn into Marigold Gardens, a cul-de-sac of interwar semis on the south side of the high street, she calms herself. All day, since she found the kennel killing on the ACL, she's been buzzing. Of course, it would be better if the cases were not linked. That would mean there wasn't a maniac out there. Not a third or fourth woman going about her business with some pervert preying, biding. Blears can't believe they've sent a woman. He returns the net curtain in his front room and regards himself in the Art Deco mirror, damping down his parting and tightening his tie. Makes his way to the front door, waits for the second knock so as not to appear unduly anxious, and smiles as he welcomes Ledengate CID into his house. Over tea, he recounts to Inspector Rimmer his precise movements yesterday evening, how he broke from his routine and had never been to that place before. The inspector seems to be a man after his own heart, but the girl, she seems a different kettle of fish. She drinks her tea in one, gulping it down, scribbling away constantly, giving him only the occasional sidelong glance. After a quarter of an hour, in which Graham has totally confirmed every last detail of the statement he gave at Ilford, the inspector closes his notebook and thanks him for his cooperation. "Just one more thing, Mr. Blears," says the girl, looking up at him, her pen hovering. "You will appreciate how keen we are to eliminate you from our inquiries." "Eliminate?" His heart skips, sinks down to his stomach, and his head blurs. "It's how we work back to the truth. Sometimes we have to prove innocence in order to expose guilt." She stares at him as she says, "Where exactly were you between 1600 and 1800 hours on the 7th of December?" "Well, how can I be expected to know that?" He looks down into his teacup. "I work in the city, you know that. I would have been at work or on my way home." "Can anyone vouch for when you got home?" "I live alone." "Anything you can come up with will help us." She smiles at him, a thick smear of condescension in the corners of her mouth. "And help you too, of course." "I don't like what you're saying," he says, looking at the inspector. But the inspector is opening his notebook back up, appears to bestow a look of encouragement upon the stupid girl. "And anybody who can verify your evening habits? You know, to prove this visit to that place was a one-off." "An aberration," says the inspector. The girl looks at her superior, nodding earnestly. Graham feels his kitchen floor warp. He looks up at Our Lady, but the walls seem to shift inwards on him, and he feels dizzy. He reaches out to grip the table, thinks he might be sick. He hears Prince Albert shattering on the floor, then the crackle of a radio. When he looks up, the girl is talking into her handset. Use curls up in a basket. She lets out a long, low whine. "13. The pastoral villages of thatched Suffolk soon give way to the suburbs, and as they pass through into larger conurbations, Pulford says, "The Aldersworth country town. That's an odd one, isn't it?" "How do you mean?" "I was talking to the night porter. He says the whole thing's gone sour. None of the locals have been involved in the construction. It struck me," he passes Staffe some brochures for the new model market town, "as kind of similar to Elena Danya's game. I wonder how much of the cash gets down as far as the girls. 500 houses. What does that look like?" "A whole pile of paper," says Staffe. "Money?" "Well, that too." Staffe goes into his pocket, hands Pulford a cheque to cover his room and share of dinner. The sergeant looks hurt. "Take it." "I insist," says Staffe. "It's not that. You could have given me cash. I could be trusted, you know, sir." Josie Chancellor watches the scene of crime team emerge from Blair's house in Marigold Close, with bag after bag of numbered evidence. His computer is to be fast-tracked at data discernment. Graham Blair's was taken into Ledengate Station for questioning over an hour ago. As she gets into the car with Rimmer, the police dog team are parking up. They have come to take Useless into care. When Rimmer told Blair's this would happen, Blair's had burst into tears. "Well, that was quite a morning's work, Chancellor. You can come along with me any time," says Rimmer. He slaps her on the thigh and removes his hand quickly. They look at each other awkwardly. "Thank you, sir." Josie feels peculiar today, not entirely a part of her own body. She has emerged from a shadow, but the sight of Graham Blair's looking for all the world a guilty man had given her no pleasure. The processing of the evidence and the rigour of all the lawyers and the judge and jury will determine whether they've got their man, but she feels a heavy hand of consequence upon her. Josie doesn't know whether to laugh or cry. Instead, she calls in data pooling and asks them to merge all the cells from this case with that of Elena Danya. As soon as she clicks off, forensics flashes up as an incoming call. The second dead woman is, according to her dental records and the prints from 3 soliciting charges and an arrest for possession of heroin, a 22-year-old known prostitute called Rebecca Stone of 21D Arlington Road, Hackney. She was murdered by 6 stab wounds. A more savage end than Elena Danya suffered. The same Elena Danya whom a Rebecca had called, talking in fact of tender petting. Josie realises she was one of the last people ever to talk to Rebecca Stone. How might Blair's connect with Elena Danya? Or, as Staffe will probably see it, how does Rebecca Stone connect with Taki Makari? They call this Little Chelsea, and it's the part of Barnes the Victorians built for their railway workers. Staffe watches the accountants who live opposite Sylvie. They're putting up their Christmas tree. It should resemble something from Frank Capra, but she throws her arms about, red-faced. He stands, head bowed. He turns the key, feels awkward using it this first time. The front door gives straight into the lounge, and as usual she has clothes drying on hangers, drooping from the curtain poles. Books are scattered on the sofa and floor. He picks one up. Holmes's Intermediate Guide to the Anatomy of the Mind. She had told him she had given up on her M.A. He could swear she had. He sniffs the air. Lacquer is thick, as if one lit cigarette would send the whole place up in flames. "Who's that?" She calls from upstairs, sounding concerned. "Is anybody there?" At the bottom of the stairs she has a photograph of her mother, taken long ago and since they last saw each other. Mont Ventoux is in the background, and the woman seems without a care in all the world. Staffe doesn't understand why Sylvie has this photograph. "It's me," he calls. "Don't look at the mess." He imagines what it would be like if they were married. She would improve. He would relax. He takes the steps 2 at a time and goes up again into the studio she's had done in the loft. He ducks his head as he rounds the top of the stairs, certain now that he will not do what he came for. He will have to concoct an excuse for dropping by. What has possessed him? Sylvie is on all fours and moaning low and deep. Her hair is up and held by a 1/4-inch paintbrush. Shavings litter the Bokhara rug he bought her. She applies the final stroke to a thin sample of wood and sits up cross-legged, swivelling to face him. "What do you think?" She looks at the strips of stained wood. "Who's it for?" "Some spoiled brat at St. Paul's. Father's a Syrian." "Oh, the walnut one," he says, pointing. "You think?" She looks at him quizzically, then back at the samples, squinting. You're right." Staffe sits on the beanbag under the hip window. He watches her tidy up. She keeps the studio immaculate, a place for everything. Hands on hips, she looks down at the violin carcass, the components that will govern her next days. "I didn't know you'd gone back to the M.A., he says. "I'm sure I told you. I spend my life talking to wood. People are sometimes more interesting. You should know that." "Give up work, then," says Staffe, taking himself by surprise with this sudden tack. "What?" "Let me look after you." He slips his hand in his pocket, fingers the old velvet of the ring's box. "I've only just got business steady, Will. I'm getting a few referrals now." It is less than a year since she set up on her own. "But you want to study psychology." "Everybody does, sooner or later. It's very probably a phase." Displacement," says Staffe. "Very good. Have you been reading my books?"
You could study, and we could live off my wage. It'll be no hardship."
He takes out the velvet box and looks at it. He daren't look at her. Suddenly, he feels sick. The muscles in his arm can barely extend as he reaches out, hearing himself mutter, "I thought you'd like it." Sylvie slides the box from his fingers, says, "Oh, my," and goes to a tall board that stands all the way up to the beam in the gable. She places the box on the cabinet and pours them each a glass of Bushmills. She hands him his and goes back to the tall boy, picks up her gift. She looks at Staffe, then at the box, as if she's on a game show and considering whether she might be better off leaving it unopened. Now, for Staffe, it feels as if life will never be the same again. She licks her lips, slowly lifts the lid. When she sees the Urals ring, her smile spreads all the way to her temples and she purrs, "Inspector, they can say what they like about you, but you've got impeccable taste." And with that, She slides the ring onto the third finger of her hand and reaches out, fingers splayed up, considering her jewel. "Do you mind, Will, if we think about it?"
Think about it?
Staffe realises the ring is on the right hand, the wrong hand. "I don't want things to change. It's often for the worse, isn't it?" She looks like a child when she says it, not quite understanding her own words. On his way downstairs, he turns on his phone, sees Josie scroll up on his missed calls list. He picks up the last message first and listens as she tells him he has 20 minutes to get back to her, or else she'll have to take Rimmer with her to the home of the second dead. He checks his watch and makes the call with a minute to spare, wondering what kind of omen that is. The man who let Staffe and Josie into 21D Arlington Road has said he is called Mitch, and that he has no papers at this gaff to prove it. He sits, cocksure and strangely removed, as Josie tells him his girlfriend has been stabbed to death.
"What are you coming down from, Mitch?" says Staffe. "What you talking about?"
He pronounces it about, which gets right up Staffe's nose. This reconstructed, trendy dealer-cum-pimp talks half wannabe black, half mockney. Staffe wants to knock his withdrawals right into next week. He might do. Staffe looks at Josie, says, "The girl was stabbed 6 times, correct?" "That's right, sir." "And this prick is a suspect, right? If we find something here to charge him with, he has to be held on remand because he's likely to abscond." "They're waiting between 2 and 4 months for trial at Pentonville." Staffe hitches his chair right up to within inches of Mitch. Mitch leans away from Staffe, not looking him in the eye. "Or," says Staffe, reaching out and removing Mitch's pork pie hat, "we could be done in an hour. We wouldn't even charge you for what we found in this place. And I wouldn't let it slip to the guys up the food chain that you've been a blabbermouth. That means grass, where you're going." He pronounces it grass. "You get me?" Staffe whispers in Josie's ear, "You sure Pulford's on his way with that warrant?" She nods. "You okay on your own with this one for 5 minutes?" She nods. "I need the loo." Staffe plonks the hat back on Mitch's head, so it comes down over his eyes. He double-locks the front door and shunts all the bolts across the door. In the bathroom, he looks down out of the window, susses that this truly is the pad of a mid-level drug dealer. The bolts, the escape via the bathroom, the first floor, low enough to risk jumping, high enough not to follow suit. Staffe lifts off the cistern lid and sees the outline of tape marks, but nothing there now. He sees the way the linoleum curls at the skirting boards and kicks away the stained, damp rug, pulls up the lino. Sure enough, one of the floorboards is screwed down, not nailed. He pulls out his keyring and uses the tiny penknife to unscrew. The board rises. Pinned up to the underside of the next board is a plastic bag full of wraps, each housing a fat corner of powder amounting to 40-50 grams. Minimum. Staffe smiles. In different circumstances, he would have kissed the big bag. As he rolls the lino back on his hands and knees, he sees that the plastic sealant around the bath is loose, and the panel isn't secure. He pulls the panel away and peers in. Nothing there, it would seem. But he reaches right in, smells the damp and dirt of the floorboards. He bangs his head on the shell of the bath and reaches as far as he can, feels plastic against the tips of his fingers. A nerve in his shoulder pinches, and he bangs his head again, curses, and snags the plastic between his fingers, wrenches it. Staffe sits back, cross-legged, and looks at the bag. Not what he expected. He can see there's a post office savings book and a notebook, some doodlings, and an envelope with Privat written in a long, elegant hand. There's a rap at the front door, and Staffe stands up, trousers the drugs, and tucks the plastic bag full of Rebecca's secret world down the back of his trousers. He unlocks the bathroom door and rushes into the hallway, sees Josie letting in Pulford. "You got the warrant?" Pulford hands it across, and Staffe tosses the stash bag onto the floor between Mitch's feet. "Sing, birdie." Mitch furrows his brow. "You what?" "Elena worked for Taki Makari. You know that." Mitch makes a bad job of trying to look blank. "Who did Rebecca work for?" Staffe prods Mitch's bag of goodies with the toe of his Chelsea boot. Josie says into the radio, "Sergeant, it's Chancellor. We need a car up at Arlington Road, Hackney. It's number 21. Possession. And stealing." "All right," says Mitch, "all right." He sparks up a cigarette. "It's the Russian guy." Staffe takes the radio off Josie. "I said, sing." "I want my lawyer." 6 times she was stabbed. "Once for every year you'll do for this," says Staffe, picking up the bag of wraps, tipping them onto the floor. He picks up a clutch of wraps and walks over to the recumbent Mitch, pressing his knee into the dealer's chest and grabbing his nose. When Mitch opens his mouth, Staffe shoves in the wraps and grabs Mitch's face, clamps his mouth shut. "Sir?" calls Josie. 6 fucking times, and left to die where dogs go to piss and perverts jack off. Now you tell me what you know, or you'll swallow this bastard lot, and it'll be just another junkie dying. See who mourns you, you... Sir!" Pulford takes a hold of Staffe's shoulder. Mitch's eyes are bulging and he's gurgling, trying to spit. "Sir! He's gonna play ball, look!" Staffe takes his hand away and Mitch spits out the wraps. One of them has burst and he foams, is sick down the side of his armchair. I don't know anything." He sobs and coughs and clutches his guts, spitting out again and guzzling from a can of lager by the fire. "Without me, she'd have been dead years ago. On the game since she was fucking 13, so don't blame me for her life. You think I like what she does?" "It didn't stop you skimming off her." "She needs me to fix her up. She can't ever give it up. You think I didn't try?" "What about Elena?" "Well, Bex was always going on about how beautiful she was and how fucking smart, just like Ara." "Ara? Thick as thieves." "Was she one of Makari's girls, this Ara?" "I never heard of him." Mitch puts his head in his hands, talking to the floor. "Ara's just some posh bird playing street." He's trying to work out if the rock is more harmful than the hard place. Eventually, he says, "Bex worked Chankov's patch." When he gets to Ledengate, Staffe re-rigs the incident room chart. Josie and Pulford sought Rebecca Stone's data. The murders of Elena Dania and Rebecca Stone feature different methods. You might say they don't connect, unless it is tit for tat. Makari's girl is killed, Chankov's girl is killed. Pulford says, "I don't see how they have to be linked." Rebecca called Elena hours before she strolled to her death in the Thames Bank. But why would Chankov kill Elena Dania? Why would Rebecca Stone have been in the kennel on her own? See if Janine has got anything off Stone's body. We've got traces of semen, sir, from the mouth. She wasn't penetrated.
Neither was Elena, says Staffe.
Well, that's consistent with a frustrated sexual attacker, says Josie.
Staffe turns round, frowning.
He sees Rimmer coming into the room.
"We've got him! We've bloody got him!" pronounces Rimmer, coming into the board, pinning a typed document to the evidence board. "What's that?"
"Blears has been identified as being at the Thames Bank Hotel at 10 to 4 on the 7th. 10 minutes before Dania was killed. 10 bloody minutes."
"Who by?"
"The bellboy, a young man called Mulplant, Gary Mulplant."
Rimmer taps the document with his finger.
"It's all there. Graham Blears is our man. Maybe you should go off on your wild goose jaunts more often, Staffe."
Rimmer pats Josie on the back and says to Staffe,
"Just so long as you leave me this one. Hey, Josie?"
Staffe leaves the rest of them to celebrate getting their man, and once in his office, locks the door, lays out the contents of the plastic bag from Rebecca's bath. He's beginning to regret not submitting it with the rest of the evidence. It tells the story of a girl on the brink of getting away, on the back of foreigners, paid into a post office account once a week. From the jottings and calculations on the papers inside the savings book, it seems her debt with Chankov was dragging her down. He places the brown envelope on the desk. It is marked Privat in a long, elegant hand. Staffe looks closely to see if the envelope has ever been tampered with, but it is quite plain that Rebecca has been a loyal custodian. Staffe takes his bone-handled letter opener, inscribed to his father for 10 years' loyal service. He inserts the blade and pulls it back quickly. Inside are 4 sheets, elaborately decorated, and each undertaking to pay the bearer £25,000.
"Elena,"
whispers Staffe. As he says it, even though he is in his locked office, he looks around to check he is unheard.
End of Disc 3.